everybody knows where they were on day of 9/11. Tim and I were TDY down in Fort Walton Beach at AFSOC doing some chem warfare stuff, and 9/11 happened obviously on that day. They stood up jets on alert in St. Louis, with live missiles hanging on the rails. I think a lot of units did that.
Being a part of helping to execute that mission was, definitely the culmination of my career at Whiteman. Fast forward to early 2017, some of our special forces see a truck in an unusual spot in the desert in Libya, and they're watching it with the drone. So they just follow the truck. They don't know where the truck's going. They're just like, we'll see where he goes. He might lead us somewhere. Well, he led them somewhere. Yeah, we got to watch it live from drone footage and all that as the B-2s went in and took out this terrorist training camp and took out somewhere between 70 and 80 terrorists.
Nice.
And that was awesome.
Killing bad guys.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Killing the bad guys.
Right. I slept like a baby that night.
Oh yeah.
You and your wife need to come with me. Like, where are we going? I go, oh, you'll see in a minute. So Irene and I get up and front and center with Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And get up there and start navigating through the paces at NGB, and and then Lauren was with me for the first year, and she decided that she was going to depart early, which was great. And then Bob Ozier from Montana shows up, and
I'll put a link to his podcast up here.
Yeah, and Bob and I were kind of like a yin and a yang.
Hello, this is Jimbo from the YouTube channel Jimbo, South Dakota, and this is the Hog House Chronicles podcast. And I am near St. Louis, sitting with two of my best buddies in the Air National Guard. We'll talk about how we met and stuff later. We got Tim Wilson and Jeff Schneider, and they met in the Air Force at Moody Air Force Base. So, Tim, we'll start off with you. Why don't you just go ahead and tell us as much as you want to about where you grew up, your family, how you got into the Air Force, how you chose your job, and ended up at Moody.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah, I was born and raised in northeast Iowa. We lived in a real small town of about 400 people called Ryan, Iowa. My grandparents had a farm just outside of Coggin, Iowa, which is only about 10 miles away. So I spent a lot of time on my grandparents' farm while I was growing up in town. We didn't have much, but I was raised with what I believe was a good work ethic. So I think that served me well in my future. So, and I don't know how it was in South Dakota, but in the early 80s in Iowa, the farm economy was garbage. I mean, farmers were going under, jobs were hard to find, and that was one of the big things that led me to consider going into the military. I actually talked to the Army first, and I think I took the ASVAB with the Navy, and then my dad sat me down one evening, and he's like, why don't you talk to the Air Force recruiter? Because my dad was in the Army during Vietnam, and he saw how well the Air Force guys were treated compared to his guys in the Army. So, right. So I did talk to the Air Force recruiter, and he sold me on it. But one thing, looking in hindsight, I wish I'd have done something. Well, no, in hindsight, it actually worked out perfectly. So I signed up for delayed enlistment, open general. So back,
oh, you did?
Yeah.
We've had that term come across this mixer board before, open general.
Right. Not many people probably know what that means, but basically you signed up and they could put you in any career field in the general, what do you want to call it? There's 4 sections of the ASVAB, the mechanical, administrative, and general. And I went in open general. So when I went to basic training, I had no idea what my job was going to be in the Air Force.
Wow.
So then maybe halfway through basic training, get my orders to go to tech school, and it's aircrew life support. So I'm reading the description, and I'm like, sounds like it could be pretty interesting. So I get to tech school in Chanute. Probably about halfway through tech school, I get orders to Beale Air Force Base. They were going to send me to Beale Air Force Base to be life support on the SR-71s.
Yeah, the spacesuits.
Yeah, I had sponsor letter from Beale and had all that stuff. So yeah, I was going to work on spacesuits. And a couple weeks later, or maybe about a week before I was supposed to graduate from tech school, they gave me a new set of orders to go to Moody. Huh. So I was real psyched up about working on the spacesuits, but they decided to send me to Moody. I guess they needed me there more. So
okay.
So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Before you start on your pass, describe where we're at, why we're here, and you know, we're hearing some creaking noises, a little bit of echo, but Chief Schneider rigged this up for us. How'd you do it, and what is it?
Hey, yeah, thanks for the little intro there. So behind us is a Pitts, bi-wing acrobatic airplane. It's not my airplane, not Tim's airplane. A good friend of ours, prior retired F-15 pilot from our unit, is a share owner of the airplane. And when I knew that you were coming down, and I got teamed up with Tim, I was like, wow, where are we going to do this interview at? And there was a couple places I was thinking, and so we landed, no pun intended. We landed here. I thought it'd be
a little late.
Yeah, I thought it'd be kind of cool to have at least an airplane in the backdrop, since our entire careers revolved around airplanes. Not these kind of airplanes,
right?
But it's an airplane. So
still high performance.
Yeah, high performance. Very, the badge in the airplane says it can do 6 positive Gs and no more than 3 negative Gs, which I don't think the airplane's going to do that. It's not going to do that today. Anyway, so our retired guy, his call sign's Crash Layton. F-15 driver from St. Louis, still lives here in town, obviously, and so I met him out here last weekend. Got the keys to the hangar, got the keys to the airplane too, but we're going to leave it parked. So anyway, that's the how and the why we're here.
Ah, perfect.
So, yeah, thanks to Crash.
Right. Yes, thank you very much. This is special.
Yep. And before Crash was a part owner, there was another F-15 driver. His call sign was Spidey. I knew Spidey had an airplane out here at this airport, so I reached out to him just a week and some change ago. And he goes, I sold my share to Crash, and 12 hours later, Crash and I are talking. So anyway, here we are.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. All right, your history, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah. So not the same narrative as Tim, but in high school, the crew of guys I was primarily running with, 2 or 3 of them were going to college. Two or three of us were not. That was me. Just academically, probably more of the financial piece. I'm like, I don't even know how to do it. My parents didn't go to college, which is fine, but it was kind of a intriguing moment. Mid senior year of high school, a couple of my buddies, 2 or 3 buddies that were going to college, they got their acceptance letter. They were all ramped up, excited that they knew where they were going. And 2 or 3 of the other guys, that we were hanging, were like, "Well, what are we going to do?" I'm like, so I just made a self-defined moment, and I'm like, I was raised in the St. Louis area on the Illinois side of the river. I grew up 10 minutes from Scott Air Force Base, and my mom sold real estate. A lot of her clients were Air Force people, not all, but a lot. She had nothing but a lot of good things to say. I talked with my dad briefly, and he served mid-late 60s in an Army Reserve unit. He was a helicopter mechanic, and on a little, like a MASH-looking helicopter. I got pictures of him, on the big bubble and all that. So, long story short, I went to the Air Force recruiter solo and did my ASVAB thing, came back. I had 4 or 5 different jobs, and the aircrew life support one came up, and like we all, we read that narrative, what the description looked like. I'm like, well, it looks pretty interesting. It looked like more medical than what we actually authentically did.
Pretty short narrative.
Right.
Yeah, and I've said it before, but mine, and it was actually looking at a computer screen at the time, green and white, but they forgot to put my color vision code in it first. So I'm looking at all these jobs. I had an electronics degree at the time. Ooh, color code 3, boom. 4 jobs. One of them. This was by far the most interesting read that I had. So I was like, sign me up.
Yeah. So the So I signed up for that, did delayed enlistment thing. I guess I got things teed up, April, early May of my senior year of high school. They're like, well, when you want to leave? I'm like, I'd like to spend the summer at home. And long story short, I left the following February, so I made it through the holidays. Got done with basic, went to tech school up at Schneider. Most people don't know where that is anymore.
Rantoul, Illinois.
Yeah, got
the
done with that.
skeleton is still there.
Yeah. So got done with that in May or June of '84, and first duty assignment was Moody. So I got to Moody before Tim did.
That's in Georgia.
Valdosta, Georgia.
So southern Georgia, I don't know, 30, 40 miles from the Florida line, and I had no idea what I was really up against. Tech school, you're turning wrenches and learning about flight gear, whatever, and so I end up rolling through the gate and get to my. The only thing I knew that they had F4s. I didn't know what that really meant. And sure enough, there was 3 fighter squadrons. Each squadron had 24, 25, 26 jets per squadron. So we had 75, 80 F4s on the ramp. And the rest was history at that crossroad. So when I got teed up and started turning wrenches and getting my training done and all that kind of stuff, things were going good. And Tim eventually showed up. I got there May or June of '84. You got there
March of '85.
Yeah. So 8 or 9 months went by.
Sure.
Never laid eyes on Tim before until he got there, and things just started evolving. The unit that we were, the wing that we were in, the unit that we were in. I don't know if it was just our squadron. We were in the 70th Tactical Fighter Squadron. There was a 68th and 69th. We were in the 70th. I know that our squadron, I don't know about the other two, we were defined back there in '84, we were defined as a rapid deployment force. Mm-hmm. So we got to wear a special patch on our uniform, like RDF, really? An RDF patch. Yeah. And back in the day, there was a defining moment, that was just stemming off of, not really from Vietnam. I don't know what generated the RDF concept, but we were expected to be able to deploy and be at the next combat area. I think 72 hours. Yep. From ramp to ramp.
Right.
So that was pretty much ingrained into the who and the why from a unit perspective. And then I'm seeing all these pilots and these Wizzos, the backseaters coming through, and they're getting geared up, and I'm, you connect the dots pretty quick. And so did that, and then, our unit, the wing was, one of the earlier wings in the Air Force that was going to convert to F-16s. Mm. So one of the other sister squadrons was going to start that quest first. I don't remember if we were the second or the third squadron in the queue. Doesn't matter, other than we were converting F-16s. And the linkage of that is some of our F-4s, most of the F-4s, not all, were going to go to guard units. Right, there was guard units that had F4s, but our ramp, a lot of those were going to either go to the boneyard or go to other guard units, et cetera. So during this quest of starting to make the transition, I heard some of the a couple of pilots and a couple of Wizzos talking that they were going to St. Louis to deliver some jets. And I hear St. Louis because I was home, but I was back there turning wrenches. And eventually, even though I was a young airman, I rallied over to a couple of the pilots. I go, hey, did I hear you going to St. Louis? He goes, yeah. I go, what are you doing? He goes, we're taking some jets up to St. Louis. I'm like, oh. So were you taking them up to McDonnell Douglas, who was the manufacturer of the jet, the Phantom? It's now Boeing, but the manufacturer originally was McDonnell Douglas. I said, so taking a couple jets up McDonnell Douglas for some kind of an upgrade? I'm airman nobody, 20, 21 years old. I don't even know what I'm talking about. They're like, no, we're taking them to a guard unit. I'm like, I don't know what that means. I didn't know what the Air National Guard was. Most of us have some, not all, but some people don't. I didn't know what it meant. I said, so you're telling me that there's a squadron like this in St. Louis with F-4s? He's like, yeah. I go, that's impossible. He's like, well, I was up there last week. I dropped a couple jets off. I'm like, all right. I said, when you come back, I said, when you're up there, get me a phone number, because this is all pre-internet and all that. A few days later, he comes back, hands me a number to the life support shop. I called, fast track. That was probably late summer, early fall. I come back home for Christmas. I called before I showed up. went to the guard unit, the 131st. It was a fighter wing. Went to the life support shop. And I'm like, I'll be damned. Here we are. And out on the ramp was some of our Moody F4s that still had the MY on the tail. They hadn't been painted yet. And I'm like, so how do you get a part of this? And they're like, you can polish Jays from active duty to the guard. I'm like, well, sign me up. How do you do that? Met with a recruiter and made the transition.
Yeah, you double the amount of commitment you had left. I did the same thing when I got out.
Exactly.
So,
Yep.
So how long were you guys at Moody together? And did you like meet and hit it off right away, or what was the time frame before this?
I would say that we hit it off rather quickly. But we were only stationed together for
From the time you got there,
March of '85 until
June of '86.
June of '86.
So it was short.
15 months of active duty
15 months.
together. Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
So,
Yep.
but yeah, so closing out, that was the fast track of the how and the why, and I thought I was going to do a 4-year enlistment, and I was hoping that would give me enough structure, enough of a compass setting, because I had a desire and an appetite to go to college. I just didn't know how to do it. It just wasn't. It didn't feel like it was in my sphere for reality out of high school. I said, well, I'll use the military, and I'll use that as a springboard to get me. That was my objective. Well, 4 years turns into 33.
Yeah.
I think we all say that.
Right.
And we'll get into to some of the narrative, the how and the why that even happened.
Sure. Did you guys get to deploy it all together from Moody, or were you just there wrench turners for a year and then gone?
I don't recall us ever going TDY or deploying at the same time.
No.
Because you were on a deployment when I got to Moody in March. I can't remember which deployment it was, George or
Vegas or
Red
Red
Flag
Flag
or
or
something.
something.
Yeah, some of that. But yeah, so you weren't actually there, but like a week later, these guys came back from deployment, and that's when I met all of them. But yeah, no, I don't believe we ever went TDY or deployed together while we were active duty.
Yeah, yeah, that didn't happen.
Yeah. You started hanging together off base and stuff.
Yeah. There was a lot of opportunity just to kind of bond and all those kind of things, and Tim, being Midwest, I was Midwest, and started talking in short order. Not the first conversation, but he's like, hey, I'm going to be going home on leave over the holidays. I go, well, me too. And we did a lot of, well, not a lot, we probably did it 2 or 3 times.
Right.
Driving up together, from Moody, we'd get in the car together, we'd tag team driving.
Right.
And he'd stay the night at my mom's place with me, and then he'd finish his drive up to Iowa, and then he'd come back and get me, and did that 2 or 3 times.
Right. Yeah, because it was back in the speed limit was 55.
Yeah.
On every highway, or at least even on the interstates. And so, yeah, it was 12 hours from Valdosta to Belleville, where he grew up. And so, yeah, like you said, I'd spend the night, get up early the next morning, and make the last 6 hours to my folks' place in Iowa. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
So it was quite the journey. But we no TDYs together, at least active duty. We'll talk about a couple TDYs from the guard perspective.
Was the squadron pretty tight? Did a lot of you go out, together and do some off-base bonding?
Yeah, we actually did, and I didn't realize. To me, it seemed like a guard unit before I knew what a guard unit was, because on Friday and Saturday nights, a bunch of us, especially the single guys and single pilots, would go to a bar called the Deli Bar. That was kind of our official or unofficial squadron bar, because we didn't have a squadron bar on base. So this little dive bar in Valdosta, Georgia, kind of became our squadron bar. So
Nice.
And that's where the squadron generally socialized on Friday and Saturday nights.
Yeah.
So yep.
There's got to be one place of gathering that's your standard.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So
So that's probably about as exciting as it got at Moody.
No, there were some weird things that happened, even though it was short, a short stint. I don't know if you remember. You probably do remember the story. I think you were probably there at that time, even though there was an 8-month lag between I got there and he got there. So we had this exercise going on, and I'm, young airman, you're trying to figure out what does all this mean. We're doing this exercise, and we're even back then we were the ones that were issuing the weapons to the air crew, and so we had to do that. And there was protocol, I guess there's still protocol, that when you got the weapons out, somebody still has to be armed to protect that resource, even though the likelihood of ever happening is pretty slim, right? So, and it wasn't our squadron, but it was
69th.
It was 69th, fighter squadron. It was they were in the next building over, and they were issuing their weapons to their crew, and so there's this life support guy that's he's the one that's packing heat. Now this is pre-9 Beretta 9mm where we got a 38.
The old Smith & Wesson Model 15. Yeah.
And so this guy's got his whole, we're not in the shop with this guy, but the way the story unfolds is the light sport guy has got his holster and he's packing heat. And he shot himself.
Oh no.
Yeah. So the weapon got lodged, I think, and pulled the hammer back, and the trigger got released and it shot him in the leg. And obviously everything King's X stopped. The wing commander is like, rightfully so, is freaking out. Yeah. And the best thing out of it, it wasn't a life-threatening injury. I think it went, the bullet entered, exited his leg or whatever. Nothing vital. So that was a weird thing, but something like that sticks. Mm-hmm. Especially as you're moving forward in our career. Mm-hmm. And so, Tim and I, we experienced the same thing from afar because it didn't happen in our squadron. But as you move forward, as our careers progress, because my 4 years and like Tim's, turned into 30 plus, issuing the weapons. I mean, obviously it's serious, but I'm like, I knew a guy that got shot.
Yeah.
So you just take that. So that
was one to the training scenario.
Yeah, that was one story. And then the other story that kind of sticks is, I forget which squadron because it wasn't ours. We had an F4 that the guys had to bail out. I think it happened twice in short order. So 2 F4s went down. Wasn't in our squadron. And you're back there turning wrenches on gear, and you're putting the chutes and kits in the airplane, and you're on the flight line, and like, yeah, we lost a jet yesterday or today or whatever. And I'm like, so it just kind of stuck home. I'm like, this is real. This isn't playing. This is serious, And so when you're a part of a unit, even though it was our sister squadron that had, the mishap, and I think it was 2 F4s and everybody got out. But the story of a guy shooting himself and a couple airplanes going down.
Yeah.
A couple defining. I'm sure Tim's got a story or two that shadows or echoes or maybe something totally different. I don't know.
Right. I mean, similarly, we never lost an aircraft while either one of us was in the 70th. But after he left and went to the Guard and Palisades to the Guard, there was the 68th did have a fatal mishap where they were doing a bomb run down at Avon Park, Florida, which was one of the gunnery ranges a couple hundred miles south of the base. And they were doing night bomb runs. And the pilot didn't realize he was inverted, and his wingman says, "Watch your altitude." Oh. So his natural reaction is to pull back on the stick.
Yep.
And drove the Wizzo straight into the ground.
Man.
I mean, if there is any blessing, they probably had no clue.
Right.
They had no idea it was going to happen or did happen. So It happened so fast. So
yeah, that whole deal of trust your instruments.
Right, exactly. So all those little things like Jeff had said, from the perspective of the job that we do, it definitely makes you think twice and always be sure that the stuff we were working on was right. Mm-hmm. And that was a common bond that we always shared, was doing the job right, regardless of what else needed to be done, that the pilot's gear was spot on. So
yeah, that's the deal with our career field is just, you're only going to use it if they're having a really bad day.
Right.
And, Chief Wiley talked about that last night when we were at his place, just trying to impress that upon ourselves first and then the other NCOs and airmen, because any job can get repetitive and mundane. But, that level of awareness that you guys are talking about, I mean, you had those experiences young, so it was there.
Right.
Yeah. But how do you impress that upon somebody that didn't actually witness it? But, yeah, any job gets there's some ho-hum to any job, no matter how exciting it is.
Right. Yeah, and we had some characters at Moody, and I'm trying to think of some G or PG rated stories of any of them. Old Tech Fear was our supervisor for a while.
Yeah.
He was talking about him this
morning. I was talking about him this morning.
Right. Yeah, Tech Fear was...
he was going to stand in line for people.
He was. Yeah, that was his job after he retired from the Air Force, was going to get a job standing in line for people. And there's probably a market for that now. He was kind of a visionary because, people probably do that kind of thing. I mean, people don't even do their own grocery shopping. They pay the employees at Walmart to do it now, which nothing wrong with that, but...
Yeah, and that's the way you described it, was at the grocery store. He was going to stand, and he was serious. His eyes were big.
He was absolutely serious, yeah.
You're going to what?
And I remember...
His car?
I remember Farmer.
Oh, Farmer Williams, yes.
Yeah, Farmer. He was...
Another character.
One of the guys in our shop.
Right.
His respectfully, his God-given name was Farmer. Mm-hmm. And he had this contagious laugh. We're not even going to try to mimic what the laugh is.
Done.
But
right.
guaranteed, if you heard him laugh, whatever day you're having, you're going to be laughing.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So he was just funny.
Absolute fact, yeah.
Yeah.
And Rodney.
And Rodney, yeah.
He was, anyway, there wasn't any good stories to tell about him. He was kind of like the, I don't want to use a bad word. He was kind of the weak link in the shop.
Sure.
So he didn't last long.
No, he didn't. So
No matter how strong your chain is,
right.
somebody's the weak.
Right.
Yeah.
But he kind of
self-imploded.
right, yeah.
So I was telling Jimbo this morning, I go, yeah, talking about tech fair. I didn't tell him, but I said we had, it was very unique, even though we were the young guys in the shop. The chemistry in the shop, just the personalities and the way that we all individually blend, because that's the great thing about the military. You're bringing in multifaceted people and diversity, and you're blending, as young people. I remember, routinely, we would laugh virtually all day.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we would get in trouble. The LSO would come back. It's like, hey, you guys got to knock that off. You can't be laughing all day. Nobody's going to take you guys serious. I'm like, well, it's pretty
based on
funny
what
what
you're
we're laughing
working on.
about.
Right. We were working, but we were laughing at the same time. Absolutely.
Yeah. It was kind of funny.
But yeah, you're right about that. So.
Yep. I was telling Jimbo this morning, on a parallel note, way back in the day, this is, we had like a big table, maybe seemed like an 8-foot by 8-foot table. And that's pretty much where all the work was done. It didn't matter if you were turning wrenches on helmets and oxygen masks, or if you're repacking an F4 kit, you're working on G-suit, whatever you're working on, it's all done on this table. So everybody's kind of got a couple of, there's 4 or 5 seats around it, and everybody's just doing whatever they're doing. And I don't know, I was packing a kit, an F4 kit, and I opened up the drawer, and the drawer was just littered with tools, but there wasn't any CTK back then. There's just tools in the drawer, kind of like most people's garage.
Yeah, no shadowing.
And I think we had our favorite screwdriver. There's a couple of plates you had to take off inside the kit, and that was kind of my favorite screwdriver. And so I'm packing this kit, and I go, man, where's my favorite screwdriver? And I'm like, I don't know. 120 days later, a kit comes back in. It's been in a jet for 120 days. A different life sport guy opens up the kit. He's like, hey, Schneider. He goes, I think I found your screwdriver.
Oh, man.
It's in here in the kit, like in between the rucksack and the raft. I'm like, oh, I don't remember if I packed the kit or not, but there's a reason why we got CTK.
See, he didn't say that part this morning, so I was like, wow, this guy's really telling on himself here, especially based on the positions you've held in there.
Well, I'm just...
That's good on you.
And I was the same guy, in survival vests, or the kits, but in survival vests, the match container, you put 15, 20 matches in there, and there would be a little round piece of cardboard that was on top of the flint.
Yeah.
Well, my training was so unbelievable. I'm like, why are people leaving this little stupid ring of cardboard in here? So I kept on taking them out and throwing them away. And the QC process must not have been too good until one day when Randy Russ, he's like, hey, Jeff, what's going on? And it comes like a flamethrower because the cardboard stop is gone. And, I'm the one that did it. And he just has to let it go.
And as that flame builds up, it builds up the pressure and just shot out of the match container there.
Because, when you're training people, you tell those stories, but you don't know if it happened for real or not. But look at this. There's another one.
But see, we learn from our failures as much as our successes, if not more.
That's right. So when you're doing the whole QC, you got to be as humble as you can. And Randy's like, how many of these little round discs you throw out? I go, every vest I've touched. And we probably had 80 of them. Not that I touched all of them, but we had to do like a one-time check back, because 20-year-old Schneider airman's taking the stuff out, didn't hurt anybody except for the flamethrower.
Yeah, I had a bottle issue with the diffuser plug and the lack thereof of it being there. It was still on the rope, on the lanyard. Oh. And I was training a young guy named Mike Rastetter. Call out to you, Rat. Maybe we'll get him on here one of these days. But I was going. I totally blew that off, and it was just jumping around on the rope. And I reached up and grabbed it and pulled it down, right up on the lanyard. But it did nick him right in the head. He needed like one little stitch like that. And holy cow, what a learning deal there. So as we keep going, we'll have about every safety issue that we can train everybody on now. So. Yeah.
There's a reason why those things happen.
Right. Yeah, I think my big bonehead moment from active duty wasn't a safety. Well, I guess it could be considered safety related. I think you were still there. but we were having a ORE, and it was the very first ORE I had ever done, an operational readiness exercise for those who don't know what that means, of course. And so I was the last person left in the shop, and the boss was like, all right, there's going to be some air crew coming in, or there might be some air crew coming in, just post-flight their gear. Well, some air crew came in and one of them still had a live weapon that he was supposed to have turned in earlier in the day. So he brings it back to the shop and he just hands it to me, and he's like, all right, here you go. I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? I'm the only guy left in the shop. I mean, I've literally been at Moody for maybe a month or two.
Oh, man.
So I'm like, all right, think. Well, it's not like communication wasn't what it is now. It's not like I could just text or call or whatever. It's like, all right, think. So I locked it up in one of those wooden cabinets we had next to the big table that you were talking about. I locked it up. I mean, I put a padlock on it and everything. It was semi-secure, as a wooden cabinet with a padlock could be. And
with nobody knowing that it's there.
Right, except for me.
Yep.
Was the ammo still in it?
I'm sorry?
Was the ammo still in it?
No.
Okay.
No, it was unloaded. I mean, I cleared the weapon.
It was loaded.
Yeah, no, the weapon was cleared, so it was just a relatively unsecured weapon. It was as secure as I can make it.
Sure.
And I even tucked it in behind stuff, so even if somebody went in the next morning and opened up, they wouldn't see it right away, and it wouldn't be staring them in the face. So I'm like, well, I'll be at work first thing in the morning. I'll take care of it. No problem. And I'll ask the boss what I should do, because I didn't know the answer at the time. So of all the days to either forget to set my alarm or oversleep, I don't know what I did, to be honest with you. All I know is that I hear this loud banging noise on my door, and I can see a lot of daylight. I'm like, well, that's not a good sign. And it's never a good sign when your life support officer and the wing life support superintendent show up at your dorm room first thing in the morning, and they're looking at me like, dude, what the heck is going on? We've got a missing weapon, and you didn't show up, late for work today. Yeah. I'm like, oh my God. So.
Oh man.
Right. And so. So I get dressed as quickly as possible. No shower, no shave. It's just like get to work. I mean, they stood at the door and waited for me. They were not letting me out of their sight. So they took me to work. I got the key out, and unlocked the cabinet, got the weapon out, handed it, opened it up to make sure it was clear, and gave it to them. And they were like, all right, that's not the dumbest thing you could have done with it. So
better taking the weapon back to your dorm room.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so,
no doubt.
Yeah. So I got in a little trouble, but it was mostly a counseling event for doing something, having good intentions of doing something kind of right, but
doing the best you could
then
based on your training level.
Based on my training level, but then really boneheading it the next morning by oversleeping.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, when I Palace chased out of Offutt is where I went active duty. Went to Sioux City, Iowa, which is just half an hour south of where I grew up. And my boss was giving a component class, and he had a Mark 124, and that's a flare with a day and a night end on it, and you just have that tab that you just slide out to prep it, then you hold on to it and you would pull to activate. Well, this is one that activated just on the slide portion of it, and that flare went off inside the classroom. And they were filming, VHS back in the day. Wing commander and the vice were up front, and wing jumped this way, vice jumped this way, and my boss is standing there just shot. And then he goes, just running outside with this flare going. I think the night end was going. So,
wow.
Yeah, there's another one for our list.
There you go. Yeah.
The shit is real.
It is. It's just, stuff happens. If you can't make it up.
Right. Oh, wow.
So you guys showed up at St. Louis.
Yeah, I was first.
Okay.
Right.
Yep. So June-ish of '86, I make the migration. It was only 2 years and some change into my 4-year hitch, and and there was a couple things that were provoking all that. But at the end of the day, I registered for a couple college classes, had to get away from it, because I was going TDY and stuff like that, and I wasn't disappointed and irritated by it. I was just like, I thought it was going to be different. And the opportunity, it looked really attractive, the opportunity. I'm like, all right, I got my footing. If I can go back to my home turf, St. Louis, and still be a part of what I've been doing, I said, maybe that'll open the Pandora's box to hit some of these objectives that I thought. And So I get there June of '86, traditional guardsman for just under a year. Did a little soul searching during that year, which was fine. And then a technician position came open. And back, mid '80s, those were coveted positions. Those were not easy to come upon. So I made it through that gauntlet pretty easy. No sooner than I got hired on full time, we had another technician position coming open, and I was still staying in contact with Tim. And I said, "Hey," we got another position. This is kind of what it looks like, And I think dollar to dollar, it was probably a little bit more money than what the active duty pay was. Not that we were running to chase the money aspect,
Right.
But Tim applied and fast track. He was up there. I started June, I guess, of '87.
Yep.
You got there
Right. September of '87.
Yeah. So 3 months after I came a technician, 3 months to the rear, he came up.
And you're that much closer to home now.
Right.
Yeah. Still not home, but close. 2/3 of the way there for sure.
Yep.
So I took a little bit of a leap of faith when he called to recommend that I applied for that job, because I had to apply for the technician position and apply for the Palace Chase at the same time in order for the timeline to work. Well, if the Palace Chase would have worked, but I wouldn't have gotten the technician job.
There you are.
Here I am in St. Louis. I'm not home. I'm not active duty, and I've got a part-time job in the Guard. Not knowing how, in hindsight, now I know that the Guard probably would have done something to put me on, days as often as they could.
A little bit of a twist, but that happened to me.
Right.
Because I had a guy that was always trying to get me in the Guard in Sioux City there. Told you about him this morning. Well, I did active duty, and I was going to go ahead, and he contacted me, and the position was open at Sioux City because the boss left, and they hired his, and the next one was going to come open. And they said, but they're not going to open it up nationwide. So I had to Palace Chase, did all that, and then they never even opened the position. And there I was with a 1-year-old baby, wife, decided to try to go back to college again, and yeah, so that sucked.
Right.
But it led me here.
Right. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
All part of the journey.
It
All
is.
part of the journey.
Yep. Everybody's got to go through what they did to be where they're at now. Right. Hopefully where they're at now is good.
Oh, yes, it was.
Yeah.
It is.
Yep.
Definitely.
So anyway, so Tim and I, September '87, June or July, whatever, in the '87 time frame, technicians, and we had at that point, we had a ramp full F4s. We had E models then. The squadron has C models before that, which Tim and I weren't a part of ever with the C models. And it was a pretty well-oiled machine. It was, obviously, this is '87, '88, '89. So the 1991, the Iraq-Kuwait thing wasn't a deal yet. Obviously, 9/11 wasn't a deal yet. So we were still kind of operating as a like most Guard units, kind of like a vintage Guard unit. Mm-hmm. And we've obviously the flew jets every day, and we pretty much we worked Tuesday through Saturday, full time. So the traditional Guardsmen pilots that were either airline guys or whatever job they had full time, a lot of those guys flew either one evening, what we would do, but primarily on a Saturday.
Sure.
So that was kind of that regiment. And it wasn't bad. That was the regiment. That was our deal.
Yeah, a lot of our aircrew worked at McDonnell Douglas right across the ramp, so they worked a Monday through Friday job. So Saturday was their day to come in and fly. So that was I actually liked that work schedule, working Tuesday through Saturday, and then having Sunday and Monday off. Yeah. So
take care of some of your personal stuff on a Monday when a lot of people already work.
Right.
So we did that, and it was unique from. Now that Tim and I were acclimated, obviously down at Muni, and now we're teamed up as technicians, and there was only at that point 2 or 3 other technicians that were a little older than us, and Tim and I, via our experiences where we experienced from a unit, which we chatted about, lost a couple F4s. Tim experienced another F4, even though they were in sister squadrons where he had fatalities. The unit hadn't experienced a mishap like that in a long time. It was never with an F4, I think maybe with an F100, really dating myself back in the day. But it's not that the unit didn't take it serious, they just hadn't experienced. And the light sport shop hadn't experienced. And so you got the 2 young guys coming in, and we know what it could look like. Mm-hmm. It's not that we talked about it every day, because we didn't. And then sure enough, I think in the after we were there, and I think in the 88 time frame, I think that's about when it happened. Had some F-4s, take off, went to the bombing range, 20, 30 minutes from St. Louis, and they were doing their runs and caught on fire. The airplane caught on fire, and they bailed out. And they made it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Big Bird and Bodie.
Yeah, Big Bird boat, and Boatwright, punched out, and I'm like, wow, that's 4 jets in about 3 years, right? 3 or 4 years of having a uniform on. I'm like, this just reinforces that it's serious, and Tim and I independently, took it. We weren't rogue about it. We just took our job serious. Not that other people didn't, but we took this serious by virtue of what was happening. And then we had another. Those guys bailed out fine, and then we had when Carl.
I think that was an 89 time frame.
89, 90. We converted the unit converted to F-15s in 91. So 89 or 90, regardless of the date, it was still, we were still in F-4s, and had another F-4 that taxied out, got cleared for takeoff, is on the runway, throttles up, a lot of crosswind. Don't know exactly what happened other than the jet on takeoff. He's on the runway, and right before he's pulling back to rotate to get airborne, I guess the front wheel just came off the ground. Maybe the mains were still on, and something happened. He's got a lot of rudder, in, and the nose wheel came back down. Details might be a little different. It was pitched to the right. The jet left the concrete at 100, 120, 130 knots, whatever, however fast it was going.
Right. Left
the concrete, porpoised through a little ravine between the runway and the taxiway. Airplane became airborne. And when it came back down, the nose strut went through the floor of the jet and uncommanded initiated the back seat. And the jet was not level when the rear seat went out. It was like pitched down.
Sure.
So the seat went out like this instead of going like that. Right. And the back seat guy was, small frame guy, and just as the chute opens when he hit the ground. Mm-hmm. And he survived it. It busted him up pretty good. And I ran into him about a year and some change ago at a A&G WebTac, and just kind of got reconvened. I hadn't seen him for a long time, and the guy in the front, the pilot in the front of that F-4, his seat did not eject, and at that point the jet was engulfed in flames.
Yeah, from fuel fire. Yeah.
Fuel fire in the ravine, and he did a ground egress, because he knew they couldn't pull the handles in the trajectory he was sitting.
Right.
And he did a ground egress, popped the canopy, and had to, get through some version of the fire to get out. And he survived it. And that just another, jab. I'm like, this is serious. It's always been serious. It's like jet number 5 in about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
so
you guys have had more than your share of experience with that. Yeah. It's unusual.
Right, exactly. But, as we continue to talk and we're sharing the narrative and the story, and I think, I would like to think anyway that Tim and I both take what we're, as we did as a profession and as a career, serious, but to be humble about it and not to showboat or to showcase it, but to share the story of this, what we do is serious, and because you don't know. Mm-hmm. You don't know. But from the F-4s, that's what happened, like I said, 89 or 90. And Tim and I would just continue to, minus the mishaps, we looked at things very abstract or maybe uniquely just from a unit perspective. Like when I first got there, I said, so where's the mobility package? I was in the guard unit, and the seasoned guy, Gene, he's like, well, I'll show you where the mobility package. He takes me into this old room that's just buried, and there's like one old school like mobility bin, right? He opens it up, and there's like nothing in it.
Sounds semi-familiar.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was like, this is an empty bin. I'm talking about where's our spare stuff? He goes, it'll be all in the shop. We'll just pack it up when we need it. So Tim gets there. I'm like, we got some work to do, because that rapid deployment force thing. I mean, we had a version of a mobility package, and we had to pack it up. But,
right. Oh, I was just going to say, just similar thing when I got there. Sorry, I just bumped the table. Similar thing when I got there. It's like I had some chemical warfare experience down at Moody, and he did as well. And I get there, and they're like, hey, we got a job for you. We want you to be in charge of the chem warfare program for the aircrew chem. And so I'm like, okay, yeah, where's it at? And pretty much the same thing, in a bunch of boxes upstairs, and I'm like, and I literally go up into this room, and it's literally just boxes of brand new stuff, never been touched, never been opened, never been fitted or put into service. So again, a lot of work when we got there.
Yeah, when I first, my very first guard drill at Sioux City was a home station ORE, operational readiness exercise. The second weekend was going to be home station ORI, where the Air Force inspectors come in.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time in the chem, and somebody in the shop was out there doing some chem training, and I just come out of that section, and I'm kind of sheepish, and I'm off to the side, and I'm like, it was wrong what they were training, almost all of it. And I went to my boss, and I'm just kind of like, this just isn't what I was just doing, just saying. And then we talked a little bit, and they're like, got it, understand. And then, so right after lunch, they scheduled a new class to start, and I was doing it. And I'm standing right next to the ops building. There's a tent connected to it, so we were using that as your egress, do all your chem stuff here and get in there. And I had just come out of 6 months straight of training, not just chem, but egress, hanging harness, water survival, land survival, all that stuff, helping our SEER instructor. So I was versed and sick, and there's full bird colonels, generals at Offutt that you're instructing and stuff, but the instructor is the boss. And I'm instructing and standing back against the tent where two guys just kind of like this, just talking, and I'm standing on my single step, and I stopped the class. I look and I said, gentlemen, sir, got their attention. I said, this is pretty important what we're doing. It's for this next, weekend, this inspection coming up. I'd appreciate it if you'd move up a little bit and pay attention. And they put their arms down. They came up and paid attention. And later at the end of the day, I get in, and Denise Larkin was our NCIC there. And she goes, oh, good on you. She goes, you know who that was? I go, no, ma'am, I don't. She goes, well, that was the Wing Commander in Levice, but they know who you are now.
I'm sure they did.
I had to pass that on with our commonality there.
Oh, yeah. Yep, absolutely. Oh, yeah. But, you mentioned Jean earlier. I'd like to give a shout out to Stevie. She was the superintendent of the shop at that time. And I don't know, I'd like to think that she had really good taste in hiring, because she hired Jeff, she hired me, and she also hired Half Man. So
there you go. And we're to this chapter.
Right. Yeah. So that was, I'd like to think she had good taste. So, I mean, we had some other comedies throughout there. I try to think but
you can always jump back if something.
Right.
As we move into here.
But what Tim's saying at the early onset, that was just some by chance initial framework, Half Man, Paul Carney. When he came in, he was active duty, out at March Air Force Base.
Yeah, he was at March, and then he was at Vance when we hired him.
Is that where he was at? Okay.
Yeah, working down in Enid.
And he grew up in southern Missouri, wanted, like all of us, wanted to come back closer to home. He came on. He was a traditional guardsman for quite a while.
Yeah.
For 4, 5, 6 years, just waiting for one of those coveted positions to come open. Right. He really wanted to come on full time, and the positions just weren't there.
Right.
So he went through his trials and tribulations, did a really unique, great job. He had three young kids when he got out of active duty and came to the Guard, and he committed to those kids to do the best that you can when you're raising kids. And finally, I guess it was when Gene retired.
Right, in '93.
He was a technician, and that's '93 is when Half Man came on board.
Right.
And then that was really jumping the gun a little bit. That was some of the nucleus from a continuity perspective. Paul's experiences similar but different to us. He has his own journey, his own narrative, but he took, like what Tim and I did. He took it serious, right? And we learned, you know, at the onset of three of us that we had some unique chemistry, and we all have all of our individual strengths and weaknesses. And I don't think we were knowingly fusing those things together, but we were fusing those things together. And then Kevin, it would be remiss if we didn't bring Kevin into the fold. So we Schrammer. The short narrative there is, you know, I alluded to a few minutes ago. The unit went through a conversion in '91. We were getting out of the F4s, out of the Phantoms, and we were going to the F-15. And that was unique. I mean, the unit thought they were going to F-16, and somebody, probably from a common sense perspective, going, probably not a good idea to put F-16s across the ramp from McDonnell Douglas, because the manufacturer of that F4 was McDonnell Douglas. So we were very fortunate that we converted to the Eagle, the F-15. That was a McDonnell Douglas product.
Well, we got 16s in '91, so maybe that swung our way.
Maybe they flipped it. And without going into a deep dive of that transition, but as Tim and I were piecing things together, you know, from a micro perspective, but from a more macro perspective, when the unit knew that they were converting, you know, regardless what the conversion was, but it happened to be the 15, the wing leadership took it extremely serious. And there was a unique component, you know, and there's a lot of people that didn't go along or didn't agree with what the wing leadership was doing on how they were going to do it. I'm giving you the short version of it.
Yep.
But it was, you know, there was an objective like, oh, the unit's going to the F-15 and we're a guard unit. Well, we want to be the best F-15 unit in the CAF, in the Combat Air Force. Well, I think every fighter unit thinks that they're the best, right? Mm-hmm. But the unit took it serious because we had a whole squadron full of F4 pilots, F4 Wizzos, and obviously there's no backseat in the A model that we inherited, eventually the C. So it was so we had 40 F4 pilots. Right. Some of them had not a lot, but some of them had Vietnam time and stuff like that, and you know, very good. You know, I think they were all good pilots. But the wing leadership, every F4 pilot had to go through an interview. And you either made it through the interview or you didn't. And not very many made it through the interview. Right.
I would say slightly less than half.
Yeah.
But yeah, the wing commander didn't want a good guard unit. He wanted an exceptional, the best unit. And so his idea was to only, you know, convert a small portion of the F4 guys and then hire the best of the best active duty F-15 pilots he could, and bring that in as a nucleus to train this new squadron and bring it up to the standards that he wanted it to be. So
yeah, because he was telling me how many weapons school patch wearers you had walking down the hall, double digits.
Yeah,
where most units have one or two.
Right. Yeah, I would say at any given time, at least probably 25% of our pilots were weapons school grads.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Seemed like we had fluid base, you know, 8 to 10, you know, fighter weapons school guys. Right. But the premise of all that was, you know, there was a trajectory, there was an objective and a goal to achieve this, and it wasn't going to happen by accident. Right. Mm-hmm. And you know, and I think what that all brings into play is, you know, at that crossroad in '91, you know, we've been serving for, you know, 6-7 years, you know, wearing the uniform, and the unit was very focused on this. And you know, it's not that we were consumed by it. I mean, it was a lot of turmoil for a year and a half of going through the conversion of who made it through the gauntlet, who didn't, from an aircrew, from a pilot perspective. Right.
Yeah, it was quite a culture shock for our unit in a really quick time. I mean, it takes a long time to change a unit culture, but if you're going to do it during an aircraft conversion, is probably a good time to do that.
No doubt.
Yeah, we went from, I wouldn't say we were the flying club type of a guard unit in St. Louis when we had the F4s, but those guys like to have a lot of fun and party hard. And they might like to steal an ambulance or two every once in a while at Volk Field.
Sure. It was there.
But yeah, it was there. Right. But that was kind of the climate, I would say, during the F4 days.
Right.
It's not to say that the climate completely changed in the Eagle. It just became different.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
And so as they, like what Tim alluded, maybe 20 or so of the F4 pilots made it through the gauntlet, and they slowly converted to the Eagle. But right out of the gate, the unit was on a quest. And now you got to remember, we were converting to 91, and the 1991 Iraq conflict is ongoing as we're going through this conversion. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, and we were going through a conversion, so our unit we could have been deployed, but we didn't get deployed because we were technically in conversion. So we're not taking that unit unless we really, really, really need you. They didn't need us, so we didn't deploy for 91 for the Kuwait scenario. But as the dust settled and the war was relatively short-lived, the unit started going through the quest to select and then hire 10 or 12 F-15. I don't know if they were all instructor pilots. I think most of them were.
Oh, yeah.
And so a lot of seasoned captains, majors. I don't know if they need a lieutenant colonel. Doesn't matter what the rank was. But they were F-15s, and a lot of these guys were F-15 drivers that had combat time from Kuwait. And one of the first guys, not the first guy, when they hired JB, he had the first MiG kill of the Gulf War.
Right.
And very humble about it.
Yeah.
Right. And but the real narrative is over that cultural shift of bringing these guys in, and their hair was on fire. They knew what they were doing, and they put us on a trajectory that we had no real idea. But it reflected what the unit leadership wanted to have happen with the wing leadership. And so from 91 and then pushing forward, that's the trajectory that we were on. So
it was pretty high speed. It was high speed work and high speed play on Friday night before a drill, or on deployments when you could, or certain TDYs. But
and it was, and I think that the real tangible moment, probably for Tim, he can speak his own accord, but seeing those things come to fruition. And one thing, because I thought, it's very, 30 minutes ago, I'm like, I'm gonna do 4 years, probably get out and move on. And then next thing you know, I got 8, and I got 10 years in, and the leadership at the squadron level, not the wing, they really took the bull by the horns and started affording opportunities because they would see something in you. And and I tried to carry that through the course of my career, either for myself, but more importantly for the team. Of there's opportunity that's there, and you don't know how much you can grow and how much you can flex unless you're afforded the opportunity. And I think I personally grow when you're at least 1 foot outside the comfort zone. So from that 91, as we're moving forward, that's Tim and I and Paul and Schrammer and Jay and a few other guys, a whole bunch of people over the long haul to really experience what success looks like, and being in, not everybody gets that exposure of being inside of a fighter squadron to deal with the energy that's going on inside that building, because we're not fighter pilots. We're just guilty by association, by turning wrenches and but being around them. But over the long haul, it's like there's for me, it felt like I had some kind of infusion in my DNA that I see the seriousness. You see when they come into the shop and they're gearing up, and they are, they are just focused.
Yeah,
they're just focused. So
I remember at San Diego conference. I'm trying to remember. I called him Coach. Channel Islands.
Yeah.
But we had that event on that ferry boat that was just moored in there, and it was later in the night. We're leaning over the rail. We each got a drink, and he just looks at me. He goes, "You fighter guys, you're just different." And I looked at him and said, "It's why they call us fighters." And then he goes, "Good on you, we clinker." So the people that worked on the heavy aircraft, tankers and all that stuff, we always had a little bit of razz back and forth.
Yeah,
but
right.
I miss old Coach.
Yeah,
he was a good guy.
He was a good dude. Good dude.
Yeah. But just a little slight follow up on what Jeff was saying. Those F-15 guys pushed each other so hard and made each other better. And that culture permeated the entire group. in the entire wing. Our maintenance guys were the best Eagle maintainers in the world. And I'm not just saying that because that was our unit. I mean, these guys took aircraft maintenance to a totally new level. We'd get a new jet in from active duty, and of course, I mean, this is not a knock against active duty, but those guys, they didn't have complete ownership of the airplane.
Right.
Where I think in the Guard, we feel more of a level of ownership with the process and the part, because we're not going to be transferred 3 years from now. You know, so this airplane could be mine for the next 10, 15, 20 years, however long that aircraft is stationed here. So those guys took it at a totally different level, and not only in maintenance, but then in our shop, we took it to that same level, you know, that we drove each other to be better. And, you know, I always had this fear of disappointing those guys because we had such high expectations, not only of ourselves, but as each other. So I'm not saying from a psychological standpoint that's a good or a bad thing. It just what it was, I believe. So
yeah, some of those crew chiefs, they'd go down to the boneyard and they'd find the jet that they crewed for 10 years, and it was their jet.
Right.
Some of them still had their name on, you know.
Right.
Yeah. Pretty
Exactly.
wild. Yeah. So yeah, you guys were quite the trio. Now Schrammer, he was running the shop for a while before he ran the shop before '96.
So it's complicated because he was a technician. He was a technician when Jeff got hired, and he was also the technician that left to open up the position that I got.
Got it.
So, and I'm trying to remember, was that when he?
When he left,
he went to McDonnell Douglas on that one.
Yeah,
that's right. So Schrammer left to go to McDonnell Douglas, and then when Stevie, the person who hired us, she got a different job. Then Schrammer came back as an AGR. And took her position. That's when he became the superintendent.
Okay,
so that's how he enters back into it. He was a drill status guardsman that whole time from like '87 to '91.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
He worked in the parachute shop there.
Counting up to '96, which is the year we met.
Yes.
Right. And I was Advon in Turkey, and Schrammer's Advon in Turkey, and the 112. The very first PRC 112 radio was coming out, and he had experience with it, and I didn't. And so he was teaching me a lot of stuff, and I was just a full-time technician, but I'd only been a full-time tech for 4 years at that time. So that's when I met him, which led to meeting you guys, and that was a good deployment.
Yeah,
the old wagon wheel.
It was indeed. Yep. So yeah. Just my first thoughts, I mean, literally the first night, I mean, we clicked right off the bat, and I'm sure Jeff's going to have his own version of this story, but I'll never forget, you know, meeting Jimbo. I think I met Jimbo and Robin first. Yeah. And then Jimbo clued me in that when we met Sorney, that one of us, you're like, hey, I dare you, one of you guys, to when you meet Sorney, to call him an AGR POS.
I initiated that?
Yeah.
Yeah, you initiated.
You did. You absolutely initiated that. Right. There's nothing against AGRs, but it was a little friendly rivalry. And
because he was always getting screwed.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so
although he'd never compare W-2s at the end of the year like I always asked him to.
Of course not. And I don't know if we were in your tent or our tent. And so it must have been in your tent, because Sorney wouldn't have came into our tent for any particular reason. And Sorney walks in the door. Everybody's making introductions. I'm like, I walk up to Sorney. I'm like, hey, hand it, you know, shake his hand. Hey, yeah, AGR, peace out. So you don't have to bleep that out, do you?
Nice.
Right.
Loser.
Right. So that was like very first thing when I met the three of you guys.
Now, I think one of you might have put AGR POS on his door to his little hooch in there. Is that true?
That's possible. I can't.
I don't remember that.
To that one.
That sounds like something that somebody would do.
Right.
Yeah, maybe the other guy in the
I can't
trio.
claim ownership of it, though.
Yeah, but
did Half Man go over there with you?
He did.
I remember.
Yeah,
I thought it was all three of you.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why I remember that specifically, is because that very first night that we all went out, it was you and Robin and Half Man and Jeff and I. Robin thought he was quite the witty person.
Oh, sure.
Well, if you're going to get into a battle of wits with Half Man, you better come well armed, because he fights to the death when it comes to giving each other crap. And by the end of the night, I think Robin had been thoroughly schooled by Half Man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember walking from hooch bar to hooch bar, and
Right, because every airframe had their own bar. So yeah, that was a blast.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a good deployment, man. I was drinking from a fire hose, and just a young airman, acted, off at SAC headquarters, and equipment. It was like factory work, kind of deal, and then getting into the fighter world, then meeting you guys over there, and yeah, it was the beginning of a great education. I do remember us going back and forth on 15s versus 16s.
Oh, I'm sure we did.
One engine versus two.
Right.
And then I never got an answer back, but I did find one picture, and I laminated it, and it was two F-16s, and on the bottom of it, it said the best combat effective use of two engines. And I sent it to you guys. I never got anything back.
I forgot about that one. I do remember it now that you mention it. So
that just goes in a black hole. We don't talk about that. Right. But we did that deployment, that Turkey deployment, 3 years in a row. Doing the Northern Watch gig, and so those were pretty unique times. Doing it. It was kind of weird that we did it 3 years in a row. I don't remember why we did, but it doesn't matter. But we did.
Yeah, I think I did it twice. The last one was 2002, I think. But things change after your first time there. They develop more things. The wagon wheel bar was no longer in that. It was like a Quonset, like a mid-Iowa Quonset.
Right.
It was great, and but then later they put it in the NCO club down the road and stuff. It just wasn't.
Yeah, that first time was definitely the best, and the chow hall was closed. I don't know if you recall this, but the chow hall was closed that first deployment we did in '96, and so we got full per diem.
Yeah.
And so we were going to the commissary, a couple times a week and ordering, all this great food and grilling it right out in front of our tents. It was like camping almost when you get off work. And
yeah, because we had 6-man tents. They had 8 holes in them, but 2 of them was the day room area.
Right.
And then six spots, and outside of every other one was a grill.
Right.
And yeah, it was. Yep. That's what I likened it to was camping.
It kind of was.
It smelled great.
Yeah.
And a good Class 6 store.
Right. And depending on how far the walk was to the latrine, it wasn't always the best, especially because we were there January, February time frame.
I think
it was kind of winter. It was still cold enough to make a cold walk to the latrine.
Right.
So, but
yeah, quite the trips for sure. I don't know what else you got.
Some of the the experiences in St. Louis, you guys are kind of touching on it a little bit and kind of downplaying it, but the bonding that you 3 in particular had, because the number of years that added up and the experience was pretty cool. So just keep that in mind. So if something comes up about anything in the past, just jump in with your story there. But then things started happening. The BRAC happened. Things started changing, and you guys had to just go ahead and start explaining what went on during the BRAC, what it did to your lives, and then we're eventually going to get to your final resting places before you retired militarily, and where and how this trio evolved and then ended out.
Yep. I think before that is a crucial part of our journey. But before we do that deep dive into that part of the journey, not to showboat it, whatever, but we talk about some other aircraft mishaps, but it would be remiss, converted to the Eagle in '91, and we had 4 F-15 Class A mishaps.
Right.
Right.
Staying on that theme.
Yeah. And
more than our share.
It was just like we were just getting punched in the nose. And the 4 Class A mishaps, bottom line, all 4 guys got out. Mm-hmm. And each, every Class A is different. But we had a midair, and one, guy got out, and the other aircraft, got it back to St. Louis. So when I talked about Spidey being a part owner of this airplane, he was the guy that got the jet back to Lambert. Mm-hmm. Lost his canopy, saturated in JP8 jet fuel because of midair. But the other guy got out. And had another airplane that did an out and back to Whiteman from St. Louis, and took off from Whiteman, throttles up, gear up, and doing the battle check. And his wingman goes, "You and Burner?" He goes, "No." He goes, "I didn't think so. You're on fire." And instead of, he couldn't jettison the fuel, he declared an IFE, got it back to Whiteman, threw the gear down, and he had to land fast because he was so heavy. And it's a big runway at Whiteman. He used every bit of the concrete and was still doing 100 knots.
Really? Wow.
He bailed out, still cooking at 100 knots.
Yeah, you're not going to take it into the grass if you can do anything about
the
it.
jet went another quarter mile, after he got out of it,
Right.
Into the farm field. Anyway, so he got out. Had another one where the jet ripped in half, the whole front end of the airplane, the whole cockpit, from the bulkhead moving to the radar dome, so about 13, 14-foot section got ripped in half at 20,000 feet, and Crow made it out.
Yep.
I mean, I'm just
no
giving you the
mishap
short
or anything, but it just broke.
Yeah, unfortunately, there were some design flaws and some other things. Doesn't matter the how and the why. The jet came apart, and Crow got out. And then we had the final one where Two Dogs was doing 1v1 with an F-16 out of Terre Haute, I think.
I believe so.
Terre Haute or Fort Wayne, when they had F-16s, and 1v1 and dogfighting, and he got down to the floor of the airspace, I don't know, 2,000 or 3,000 feet, and his flight controls were jammed, and he's jerking around on a stick, can't get it, can't get things freed up, and so he jumped out, low.
That's not much space.
No,
Yeah.
got to the ground. So 4 totally different scenarios. Four more guys coming back through, that just continued to incrementally synergize what we did just from a career field. And when you look at that from a longevity perspective, I mean, you outline it. I mean, there's very few people that are a part of a unit that experience one Class A, and that's great. Our unit over the long haul wasn't that lucky.
Right.
But it really synergized, just from a, none of us take any independent credit for getting the person out. It was just what we do, and it was a team. From the egress, to prior merger, the survival equipment, guys, gals, packing those chutes and the stuff we did and the training we did to get them out. So all that is just really unique, and it really forged, who we were independently, who we were as a team. So when we get into from a teaming perspective, and then what that next chapter looks like as we start to talk about BRAC, but I don't know if there's anything you want to talk about with the F-15 components.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say was that during that time, because I think about 96 was about 95, 96 time frame is when we really started gelling as a group, because Halfman had just started as a technician in 93, and then we had Schrammer. So the 4 of us really started working together. Schrammer was always fighting for budget for us, which you needed that to build all these programs, with the chem and all that stuff. And then we started getting Combat Edge and all these new things that we had to incorporate. So, 96 was like right at the beginning when we were starting to really, charge hard. And when we met you, we kind of found a kindred spirit, where we could bounce ideas off each other and learn from each other. And then it just took off from there and just kind of became this self-eating lollipop, and just got crazy there for a few years. Yep. And I think from a professional perspective, not from a flying perspective, because I had some great days flying in the back seat of F4 and F-15, but from a professional standpoint, that ORI we had, God, that was 20 years ago next month. God,
Close
that's
enough.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I think it was May of 04. We had an ORI, just everything went off just almost to perfection.
Right.
I mean, the inspectors were just like, we've got nothing. We literally have nothing for you. You guys are so far beyond what what we're capable of. So I think they were literally there for like a day and a half out of a 3-day ORI, and then they were just like,
Yeah.
all right, see you guys.
I think back then there was like 5 major areas, and you're like outstanding 5 out of 5 areas. And,
Right.
They can just do this. They don't have to keep searching until they find that tiniest little nitnoid thing just so they can say something.
Right.
I'm glad they didn't do that.
Well, she did find a tiny little piece of rust, like a tiny little piece of corrosion on a. Remember the green tourniquets that we packed in the survival vest and the survival kits?
Right on that buckle.
She found a tiny little piece of corrosion on the buckle, but they didn't make a huge deal out of it.
She's probably winking at you when she's
right.
Make that go away.
Right.
But Tim's talking about that ORI. I mean, I forget what the grading criteria. I don't know if it was we got an outstanding, whatever it was. We were at the top of the mark, and it was 2 years before that. That was 2004. In 2002, we were in the middle of our, I think it was a UEI. I think that's what they called it back then.
Probably.
And the only unique component about that, which was 2002, Irene, my wife, was pregnant with our son, and her due date was in the middle of the UEI. Mm-hmm. I'm telling these guys, she's probably going to go long, or didn't know if we had a boy or girl. And I come home after the first day of the UEI, and she's like, I think today or tonight's tonight. I go, we can't. I go, we got this UEI. It's got to have to wait a couple of days. She's like, I don't know what to tell you. And that night, next morning, our son Michael was born. Uh-huh. I'm calling, whatever. I'm like, I know it's mill inspection, but I won't be in. And I didn't come in.
Right.
I can't imagine anybody saying anything different, on the other end of the line.
Well, sure. Yeah, but we all this time and energy that we threw in the front end of it, and it was time to self-reflect, and but it gets into the team component. Yeah. Me, Paul, Tim, and et cetera, of the energy at that crossroad of 2002, because from 2002 and then in 2004, 24 months later, we do the ORI, and I don't know, we kind of defined that we broke the code. We broke the code of, it's not that we were trying to game the system of what the inspections look like. I mean, we had our independent strengths and our weaknesses as a team, and we went through the gauntlet, and the UEI was pretty much flawless, and the ORI 2 years later was flawless. And we think we've kind of broke the code. Mm-hmm. And that's when we became on a quest to start really helping other units, right? And we did. Helped a lot of different units to get, the unit pushed down the road.
Yeah, because I became the supervisor in '99, and one of the first things I did was Mike Hawkinson and I drove down St. Louis, and we just independently just started looking at all kinds of stuff. He was more on the equipment side. I was in your office. You said I was the first one to ever come into your shop and look at every binder that you had. It wasn't all on the computer. Some of it was, of course,
right.
But later on I adopted the program of binderology, and you said I was the first one to go in there and just really look at that stuff. But the thing is, the UCI is the compliance portion of it, and they do that at your unit. The operational readiness experience inspection is for wartime. You're usually off somewhere else. So you got those two things, but you guys cracked the code. What I thought was following the regulations the way you need to, but also doing it in a common sense way where we are going to go to war, and what do we need to do? So when I had that first AFAC class, that's kind of the way I started it out. It was like, okay, we've got all these regulations. People bitch about regulations and stuff. I says, okay, we're here, and we're going to do what we need to do to go to war. No regulations. We're starting from scratch, but we have full responsibility and a full accountability. So what would you put in that regulation in order to make that happen? And that was how we started that off. It was putting those two things together.
Yep.
But I learned all that by going to you guys' units, and then, like you said, us talking back and forth. And
yep. So,
common sense is a lot of it. Just how are you going to go to war, keep your pilots safe, get everybody back to their home, to their family?
Right.
Yep.
Put a lot of weight on that.
Mm-hmm. Damn tootin'.
Right. So, all those things, are just, they're all stepping stones, and just on how, individual careers and, even from a team and a unit, how things continue to move forward. And none of us took it, I think, really over the top. We just knew that we, again, broke the code, but more importantly, we knew that the leadership, we knew the commanders had our back. We knew that I don't remember the leadership ever telling us no, regardless of what we asked for, and we knew that whatever we were doing was in the best interest for the unit, was in the best interest for the crew member, or best interest for the team to move the ball down the field. And the leadership moved mountains for us, and they believed in us and they entrusted in us, and having a couple mishaps, and we're like, oh, those guys are kind of serious, but we weren't serious over the top. We had a lot of fun, and we were humble about it, and
I'm sure other people would beg to differ, but
probably so. But when you're living in the moment, you're trying to be as humble as you can, But and then the team chief stuff came into light, and that was another whole component of things that just started to help shape and define over the long haul. And then one thing leads to another, and then you were talking about BRAC in 2005. That caught the entire unit flat-footed. I'll let Tim go first.
I think as a unit, we thought we were untouchable because we were, quote unquote, the best F-15 unit in the CAF. We felt that way. I mean, yes, we were arrogant. I'll absolutely admit it. I'm sure most of the guys would probably admit we were arrogant, but we were also really good at what we did, and we worked really hard. And we didn't rest on our laurels. And Jeff said, yeah, we broke the code. But even after we thought we broke the code, we still kept trying to improve. It was just a continuous improvement process in our squadron. So was that 2005? Yeah. So
May 13th.
Friday, that's right.
Friday the 13th.
It was Friday, May 13th of 2005. Yeah, we're all sitting up in the Moose Lounge watching CNN or whatever news channel we had on, because it was televised live on the major news networks, not on your regular network, but on the cable news networks, I should say. And one thing I can remember distinctly is that whoever was running the slideshow at the Pentagon, jumped ahead one slide before they were supposed to, and a couple of people in the room caught that St. Louis was on the wrong side of the.
Oh no!
And they were like, "Wait!" And then, but it popped up on the screen and it went away as quickly as that. And then somebody was like, "Wait! I could swear it just said that we were getting bracked, meaning we were going to lose our, and
base realignment and closure.
Base realignment and closure. So yeah, and just within a few minutes they got to that screen, and sure enough, we were getting bracked. And at that point, we had no idea what the future was. I mean, because they didn't tell you, hey, you're getting bracked, but we're going to turn you into an Intel squadron or a Reaper squadron or whatever. It's just,
to be determined. I think we were defined as an enclave, and nobody knew what that meant.
Right, that's right. I forgot that term.
We're not 131st is an enclave. I don't know what that means. Nobody knew what it meant. And so sure enough, when that happened, that took the wind out of our sails. Independently, I'm like, I don't know what lies in my future as personal, from a team, from a unit. We didn't know.
I remember talking to each one of you one at a time on the phone, and the emotions were high.
Yeah, very, very unsettling. And you go home that night and you didn't have answers, and we didn't have answers the next day. We didn't have answers a week, a month from then.
All right. One thing I am grateful of is the number of other Guard units that reached out to us with job offers.
Yeah.
I have several of them in my head. I'm not going to call them out because I don't want to exclude anyone or forget anybody. But yeah, there was a number of job offers that came out when people found out that we were getting bracked. It was very appreciative, but we were still trying to figure out whether we roll the dice and stay in St. Louis or go and try to find a job elsewhere, which we hated to see Jay leave, Jay White leave, but he had to make the best decision for himself. He wasn't a St. Louis native, nor was I, but I married a St. Louis girl. My kids were St. Louis kids, and so I kind of planted roots in St. Louis and kind of became my new hometown, where Jay had only been there for 6 or 7 years, not only, but relatively short time. And he didn't really have the St. Louis roots, so he was either fortunate or unfortunate. He transferred down to Jacksonville, but he was the only person. He was the only one that left the shop due to BRAC.
And so, he was probably a few years younger than you guys.
Jay is...
Not a lot,
I
but
think
Probably
he's...
10-ish years or so younger than us.
yeah, 'cause as far as I know, he's still at Jacksonville running the shop down there.
He is, yes. I mean, there's a little bit more to the story that I can't divulge,
Sure.
but yeah, I think he's in his mid-50s. He converted to AGR a few years ago, E8, so... But, yeah.
Yeah.
So I did a salve down there once. Maybe it was for an ORE, the war exercise. I think that was it one time before I left.
Right.
And
Might have went down there with Pat Tracy, if I remember.
that would
right.
make sense.
That sounds like trouble.
Yeah. Because, even
Yeah,
though the
Pat's
BRAC
a
was,
pretty wild guy.
even though the BRAC was, very unique. I mean, I think we're doing this kind of from a calendar perspective. We rewind for a couple minutes. We had 9/11. Everybody knows, everybody knows where they were on day of 9/11. Tim and I were TDY down in Fort Walton Beach at AFSOC doing some chem warfare stuff, and 9/11 happened obviously on that day, and so technically we're TDY. We're not home station. On 9/11 or the next morning, whenever the timing of it happened, they stood up jets on alert in St. Louis, with live missiles hanging on the rails. I think a lot of units did that.
Yeah.
And so we did that, and then once 9/11 kicked in gear and units started deploying, obviously they made a wartime assessment. They needed some F-15s, but they didn't need a lot. They didn't need a lot of air superiority, and that's what the F-15 did. So the unit didn't need or have to deploy to support 9/11, which was totally fine. That was just the matrix of how things happen. But things that were happening before then, there were 6 F-15 Guard units, and 3 of them had culturally and historically been air defense units. They sat alert to protect the homeland, which was it's happening today. But then those units drifted to a go-to-war unit, as well as doing the air defense unit. So Portland and
Jax
and
New Orleans.
New Orleans.
Were they?
What about Cape Cod?
Oh, they were. Yeah, you're right.
That was
Them
Cape
too.
Cod. Anyway, so we took the initiative to help get them teamed up because they didn't have chem gear and all that stuff. I mean, they lived a life of luxury not having chem, and they didn't have mobility packages. They had packages to go TDY and stuff like that because they didn't have a script to do it, and we kind of shaped a narrative and kind of got to the leading edge of things, and I was the F-15 team chief at that, and I'm like, well, we'll come help you. That'll be our give back. And I know units like yours and a whole bunch of other units were deploying. We weren't deploying at that rapid onset, regardless of the timing and everything. But we did all that, and then BRAC happened, and then the unit and the state did the best job that they could do to try to preserve the F-15, the mission back in St. Louis. At the end of the day, it didn't work out. And it was 2000. I don't know. It seemed like a year and a half, 2 years went by before we actually secured the mission because we were an enclave, and then the mission was defined that the operations and the maintenance package from St. Louis F-15, those packages, intuitively out of the gate, were going to morph and transition out to Whiteman, 4 hours from St. Louis with the B-2s. And the whole total force integration, where the active duty was going to own the iron, and we were going to be the guard unit associated with that, and we were going into very, very uncharted water. We were leaving our independence in a fighter unit, going into a strategic bomber that could drop nukes and drop conventional weapons, and we didn't own the iron, and it's like an arranged marriage, and we're getting pushed into it.
Yeah, because I think the majority of the total force integration was active duty pilots coming to guard units, but you guys had to go the other route. Richmond, Virginia, went to Langley. The Hawaii unit, I think, C-17s or something did that.
Right.
But yeah, so you guys are very unique.
Yeah, talk about a culture shock. That we thought the culture shock from going the F-4 to the F-15 was serious, but this was a whole new thing, going from fighters to bombers, and so. And
it was a culture shock for the whole wing. I mean, the wing and the state, got to give credit where it's due. They secured a flying mission. It just didn't look like the flying mission that we had before. And you had to do some personal soul searching to, do you want to be a part of that? You don't want to be a part of that. And there was a lot of people that were, I don't want to be a part of that. Doesn't matter who they are, but they didn't. And, I had wife, 2 kids, and I'm like, I'm in some uncharted water. And to echo what Tim had outlined, there were opportunities to pack up and move and go to another unit that would be an independent guard unit. And for some reason, for me, and obviously for Tim, it didn't make sense. So fast forward the tape, 2008, I PCS'd as a technician from St. Louis to Whiteman. I was the first, from the operations side of things from the wing, I was the first enlisted person to go. We had 2 or 3 pilots that went out from the ops group that were there. They were there a few months before I was there. And behind the scenes, between me and Tim and Half Man, when we're having these private discussions as a trio, not to dismiss the traditional guardsmen, but from a full-time perspective, different than the traditional sergeant, impacted everybody. But the 3 of us committed to go to Whiteman. I'm like, so somebody had to fall on the sword and go first. So I'm like, I'll go. It wasn't even really, I guess we probably talked about it. I don't remember. It seemed like we probably talked about it. I'll go and I'll start paving a road to figure out what the new normal is going to be.
Yeah, it's like an extended Advon on steroids.
Yeah. So I went, PCS, did I mention it was 2008 when the market went into the ditch? Yep. We had a nice house that we had custom built, et cetera, et cetera. And, you couldn't give a house away. And personally, we leased the house for a year because we had it on the market, it just wouldn't sell.
Yep.
It was nice. And long story short, we rented it out and came back a year later, finally got, those people out and put some lipstick back on it and finally got it moved. But very disruptive, moving the wife and the kids, and plenty of people do it, but it was the first time I had to do it with my wife and my kids.
Yeah.
And so I get out there, and so I'm out solo pretty much at Whiteman from the ops side, enlisted wise. I'm out there solo. Tim and Half Man, God love them. The F-15s are on the ramp for another year after I leave.
Right.
And so they, and I was given direction. You're at Whiteman. You are not at St. Louis. Put it in your rearview mirror and figure out the Whiteman thing. We talked, but these guys did a great job of keeping it together, both from a personal perspective, and then they had to liquidate the entire shop. Mm-hmm. Every part, every wrench had to be, every tester, and they had to do it knowing that when they put the padlock on the shop, that they got to come to Whiteman. They're coming. They're coming to Whiteman.
Right.
Right. So I'll give Tim a couple minutes to kind of talk about that before I talk about what that journey starts looking like.
Sure.
Right. Yeah, mine was similar but slightly different. My wife and I had some long conversations. She was working as a high school guidance counselor and doing very well at that, and loved where she was at. Both of our kids were doing fantastic in school, and there was a little bit of a fear of uprooting them and moving them across the state, and they might do fine, but what if they don't? And so there was that fear. And I don't know, people move all the time and do just fine at it, but it just didn't feel right for us. So it was an extremely difficult decision, but we decided that Karen and the boys would stay at our house in St. Louis. And we live in kind of rural St. Charles County here, but and that I would commute to Whiteman every week. Of course, then if it was drill, I didn't come home that weekend. So
right.
For 9 years, I came home 3 weekends a month, and that was pretty much it. The rest of the time, I was at Whiteman, and it was brutal.
Hard on you.
Yeah, I mean, just from a family perspective and all that, that was really tough. So yeah, tougher than I really want to go into on any deep level, but I could probably think of some stories. It wasn't all bad, and I don't want to jump too far into the story either. Yeah, it's just a different
to deal with the same thing.
Right.
But I think it'd be remiss. I mean, for for Tim and Karen and his boys. I mean, you know, we're a guard unit. We're family, and we don't say it on our sleeve. I mean, we're family.
Yeah.
And it's hard, you know, when I'm getting a little emotional.
It's okay.
Take the mic from me, and I'll come back in a minute. But.
It's okay.
Oh no, I mean, you know, I tried telling this, you know, to our new counterparts out at Whiteman, you know, the active duty guys. I mean, that's part of their culture is about every 3 or 4 years,
Right.
they PCS to a new place. So they couldn't really empathize with the way we were bringing, you know, and the way we were kind of raised in the Guard. Even though we had been active duty 20 years prior to that, we had gotten into this Guard family thing, and that was just a part of how we were made and built.
And your family that's living under your home, and that's
Right.
what gets you, because
Right.
you're moving them. You know, you said, you know, a lot of people move, but man alive, you don't really know how it affects the kids, and
Right.
and you know, each family just makes their own decision, and you deal with it. But
Right.
it's tough both ways.
And in a Guard unit, you're so much a part of the community as well. As you know, you've got your shop level relationships, your wing, squadron, and the community itself. And so, you know, a lot of us we're very active in the community, whether it be in church or, you know, other social perspectives and stuff. So, just made it really tough on us.
Yeah, I just remember talking to both you guys, you know, and half men as well. And you guys talk to a lot of people, but we just felt it on the other side of the phone, and there wasn't a dang thing we could do.
Right.
So
You know,
just try to help you laugh once in a while. Maybe.
Right. And when you're so invested in something and you've poured your heart and soul into something the way we did for all those years, it was like a big kick in the nuts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or you can hit the bleep button.
Yeah.
How about that one?
You know, but you know, on a little bit of a softer note, those times authentically to reach out, and you know, you would just listen. There wasn't a lot you could say.
Yeah.
But whether it was you or Pat Tracy, or you know, I don't want to keep on name, you know, like Tim. I don't want to not give somebody credit. Whole bunch of people who you're going to go see in a couple of days.
Yeah.
You know, just listen, because fortunately your units weren't dealt the hand we were dealt, and we weren't looking for empathy and it's just got to be tough. Well, you knew it had to be tough.
It's like the way I was told to talk to my wife: just listen, don't try to fix anything.
Right, just listen. Be a good listener. You know, and as I choked up a few minutes ago, you know, I didn't get through it now, but you know, but for Irene and Nicole and Michael, you know, my kids or our kids, you know, it's Irene and I were married for 8 years before we had kids. You know,
Yeah.
you know, out of respect, Tim and Karen, you know, they waited a little bit. You know, Paul had kids younger, so it's kind of like we had 3 different waves from raising our kids' perspective. You know, Paul's kids were older, and you know, he did a great job, and Tim and Karen did a great job with their boys. And you know, here I am. I'm like, all right, I'm the chief. I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna pave a road, and Irene's got my back. And I'm looking down at Michael. I moved him when he's going into kindergarten.
Yeah, this big.
And Nicole, you know, God love her, she was going into 4th grade. And we're moving 4 hours away. It might have been cross country, you know. And we did a fantastic job of making the move, and it was hard. It was hard managing that. Then I go to work every day, and I'm solo. I don't have a network. I mean, I got I got the leadership, I got the ops group commander, I got the bomb squad commander, you know, but they got big fish to fry. They got big things they're doing.
Right.
You know, and we couldn't go into work every day and just moan and groan and go, man, it's terrible. Because it wasn't that it was terrible. You had to spin it psychologically and look at it and go, you got to turn this into an opportunity. If not, it's going to kill you. Right? And hard. And so as you start to make the journey, both you know, personally and professionally, but you look at, you know, family comes first. I don't care what you say, family comes first. And you know, Irene and, you know, like what Tim and Karen had done, I'm like, all right, how do we want to do this? Whatever. She goes, all right. So once we committed to make the journey, we started out at Warrensburg, which is, you know, 8-10 miles away from Whiteman, and you know,
Quite a bit smaller community.
Yeah. It's smaller. It's great. I mean, it's a college town, active duty town. Obviously, there's some local natives. Irene grew up here in St. Louis on the Missouri side. She's like, I didn't know it till now, but I'm a city kid. I'm sure there's great people here. She goes, this is too small. I can't do it. Mm-hmm. I'm like, all right. So then we get, 30, 40 minutes away, we get to Lee Summit, which is a suburb on the outskirts of Kansas City. And we couldn't find a private school because that's what we wanted to do. We just couldn't find a private school that was going to meet what we needed it to meet. So we ended up in Overland Park, which was great, just on the Kansas side. It doesn't matter. It was an hour and 5 minutes
A ways.
one way to work. So on my way to work I was thinking hard. Well, it was too early to be calling people. But on my way home, I kind of had a script who I would reach out to on my drive home.
Yep. And
that was kind of my lifeline. And thank God it was my lifeline. Whether I was talking to Tim or to you or to Pat Tracer or whoever I was talking to, a good friend of mine or whomever. By the time I got home, I was decompressed and I rolled my sleeves up and I'm all in, and it's about the kids.
Family.
Right.
You betcha.
But it was hard. And not looking, like since not looking for empathy or compassion.
Right.
For it.
Right. I would say the hardest thing for me, and when we first went out to Whiteman, was the lack of control we had. Mm-hmm. We had control of every facet of our shop in St. Louis, and if something wasn't going the way we wanted to, we brainstormed and none of the three of us had a patent on good ideas. I mean, we would get in Jeff's office or in a break room or whatever, and just throw out ideas and see what stuck, and somebody might have the start of a good idea, and then we build on it. We got to Whiteman, and this is, not the guard guys out there, but and some of the active duty folks were more prone to saying no when we had ideas that we thought would improve things. Mm-hmm. And so since we didn't own the iron, we really didn't have much control. So we figured out very quickly that we couldn't just go in there with not that we were going in there with a hammer and trying to change things. We figured out that we had to use a little bit more finesse if we wanted to change.
Because you guys were always tactful.
Right.
But adding some finesse to with work stuff.
Well, there's a difference between being fighter tactful and bomber tactful.
Sure.
It's definitely different. So that was one of the most difficult things for me is I wanted to go in there and fix all of their problems or attempt to, and then it's like right off the bat, no.
Yeah, that'd be a no.
Because if you had fixed it that way at your own, why wouldn't it work over here? But then to be throwing no in your face,
right.
Not cool.
Right.
And the complexity was because I was out there for that first year solo, and then these guys roll in behind me, and I did the best job I could do to pave a road, and it seemed like that hard pavement was pretty short-lived, even when they got there, because it was no. But on a different, I don't know that it's a lighter note, but on a different note, so when I get there, out to Whiteman, we're TFI'd and whatever, and and I'm staying in a pretty narrow lane, because I don't have any allies, and nobody really understood the guard. Nobody on the active duty side, at least at the worker level, really wanted to understand the guard.
Right.
The leadership knew, and they got it. But my interface wasn't, with the leadership. Mine was, at the shop level, active duty, they had a fluid number, about 50 active duty AFE people, between all the bomb group, the bomb squadrons that were represented there. And so I stayed in a very narrow lane and got there in this late summer of 2008, and I wasn't there, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, 6 months, whatever the time frame was. I was there for relatively before these guys got there, and something, doesn't matter what happened, but something happened, within the shop level, from a supervisional level, et cetera, and it was enough that I'm sitting in my office, which was not. I was segregated, rightfully so, from where the ops group and the bomb squadron commander and all those people were bed down. And the group commander calls me. He's like, you need to come to my office. I'm like, okay. He goes, everything's okay, but you need to get over here. I said, okay. 15 minutes later, I'll go to the group commander's office, sit down. I'm like, oh, what's going on? He's like, hey, something happened. Bottom line, he goes, the active duty group commander's putting you in charge today. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, you heard me. I go, I know I heard you. I go, I don't know what that means. I go, put me in charge of what? He goes, you're going to be put in charge of the AFE shop. I'm like, oh. And I'm processing as fast as I can of what I just heard. I'm like, and what I think that means, other than common sense.
Right.
He goes, so we're going to leave here in a few minutes, and we're going to go to the active duty ops group commander's office. And he's going to tell you personally that you have operational control over the AFE shop program.
That's big.
I'm like, okay. He goes, I don't need to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you this. He goes, let's go do it over in the wing commander's office. So his office was across the hall. So we go into the guard wing commander's office. He's sitting in there, and he's like, he already knew what was going on. He's like, hey, congratulations. He goes, you're the first guy in the wing that has operational control of anything. Don't mess it up. I'm like, got it. He says, so whatever peripheral things you were doing in the wing right now, or for the group, he goes, whatever it is, it's turned off right now. I go, got it. I probably said, yes, sir. It's like, yes, sir. And so next thing you know, we get in the car, we go over to the group commander's office, the active duty, and he's sitting in there, and I'd met him. He knew who I was, and he'd already made a decision. He goes, hey, congratulations, blah, blah, blah. He goes, you're in control today. He goes, you know what's broke? He goes, you need to fix it. I'm like, yes, sir. And I don't know, a couple hours later, I took a few minutes just to kind of process what that meant. And I rolled back into the active duty superintendent, because he had already been having his meetings with his leadership, telling him he's not in charge anymore, that the guard guy's going to be in charge. And I didn't ask for that. I didn't solicit that. And he was very humble and he knew why, and humble. And I think he was relieved, because this was right when the merger was taken over. Out of respect, he was prior survival equipment. He was drinking from a fire hose. He's trying to get his arms around the AFI and all these other things. And he was a good guy.
Too much.
It was too much. And so I'm like, all right, I got to roll my sleeves up, and we're going to have to start doing this. And I'm not going to do anything rogue and crazy, and I didn't. But that really upped the ante. So that was 6 months before, Paul and Tim get out there, and not to mention the balance of the traditional guardsmen, and that all of our traditional guardsmen were very unique, because all the guard units at that crossroad had very nice educational benefits, and most of our people, they all had professional careers of some sort, and they were coming out doing this. And anyway, you push through, and I'm like, okay, I didn't ask for this, but we're gonna have to fix what's broke. And there was still a lot of resistance and no's. And then these guys get out there, and you can share a couple stories when you first got, or however you want to share, getting out there. But it was just weird. Mm-hmm. It was weird.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've kind of already said, though, my first experience was, getting stiff armed and being told no a lot when I first got out there. Not like shop level stuff, but trying to do something a little bit, higher level kind of stuff. So, but it took a really long time. I mean, apparently it took our unit, this is from what I've heard. I don't have firsthand knowledge on any of the other, what were we called, a classic associate? Is that what they called our version of TFI?
There's the active and the classic.
Right.
I think
it's called a classic associate when a guard unit or reserve unit is TFI'd into a active duty unit. Apparently, from what we were told, that our unit figured it out faster than anybody. It didn't feel that way to us.
Oh, I'm sure.
In real time, but in hindsight and talking to other units, apparently, and I'm not saying from a shop perspective or a life support perspective or AFE, it was from a wing big picture perspective, our wing figured it out quickly. I'm not sure why that is particularly. I don't know what we did better or worse or different than anybody else did. But it was a time-consuming process to figure out our place out there. And then we did. Did you ever go on an actual deployment with the B2? I didn't think so.
That was hands off. They weren't letting a chief go on any
Right.
kind of a deployment.
Right.
Right.
Some of the maintenance group chiefs, needed to go by default, but they.
Right. Yeah, pretty much about E7 is about as much as they would want going on a deployment as an AFE person. Now, if you were going to be filling a higher level role, then they were okay with E9s and or E8s and E9s and stuff like that. So, on a lighter side, of the whole Whiteman thing, I don't want to make it all the gloom and doom. I met some great people out there that to this day I count among some of my best friends, and they know who they are. I'm not going to drop their names because not many in the Guard AFE community would know these people, but we had some interesting deployments. The B2, we never really take the B2 to a really bad place. It's not going to go to PSAB or anything like that. So my first deployment in the B2 was to Guam in 2010 for 2 months, which at that time for us being a fighter, we never went anywhere for more than 2 weeks to a month or something like that. So to go someplace for 2 months was a long time. So, Guam's great, but it gets really small really fast. It's just not a very big place. But there's a lot worse places you could spend a winter than Guam. So, and then in 2013, went to Diego Garcia. Actually, Halfman got to go on that one because he was like the group superintendent for that trip. So Halfman and I had, it's hard to call them deployments when you're going to a beach island, basically. I mean, we were worked, of course, but yes, you're on a tropical island when you're doing it. But but we went to Diego Garcia for a month. Talk about getting small fast. Diego Garcia Guam makes Diego Garcia look
big.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, so Diego's tiny, but still had a great time. And then finally, my last deployment with the B2, I was we had a NATO large force exercise, and our ops group commander at the time in the Guard was the commander for the exercise, and I was the superintendent for the NATO exercise. So a lot of responsibility, a lot of work, but great deployment over to Fairford, England, where we deployed the B1, the B2, and the B-52 simultaneously for the first time ever, and then worked with a bunch of our NATO allies over there. So
That's cool.
Yeah, that was an amazing trip. So
And that just echoes, what did you say, 2013 you did that?
well, no, that's 2017. So that's where we went from when he went over there in 2008 until when I retired in 2017. We'd gotten to the point where the Guard was running B2 deployments for both the Guard and we were in charge of stuff. So
like any cultural shift going, from where we, going from independent Guard unit to a TFI, 2008, you fast tracked to 13, of 2015 to 17, and it evolved where the Guard became, a very instrumental asset. And it actually complemented the language and the definition of what TFI was supposed to do. And I would echo what Tim would outline is that, our unit, our wing on the Guard side, in lifetime, didn't seem like it was happening, but we were connecting the dots faster than other TFI units. And when I was there, I guess it was before you guys had arrived. I had operational control, so it was after that, whenever that took place. I went to a Guard only, leadership. There still wasn't a lot of us out there yet. And so there was like 10 or 12 of us that were in a conference room, all Guard, wing commander, vice group commander, whomever, maintenance commander, et cetera. And there was 2 or 3 maintenance chiefs and me. And the wing commander says, all right, here's the deal. He says, I don't know, about 6 weeks or whenever it is, he goes, there's going to be a B2 gala in Kansas City, which was an hour and some change away. And he goes, everybody at this table will be in attendance in a mess dress. It's not negotiable. I'll see you there. I'm like, I don't have a mess dress, is what I'm thinking to myself. and most in the Guard.
I didn't either.
Right? So I'm like, okay, I know what I just heard, and he said it was non-negotiable. And so I already drank enough of the Kool-Aid going, I got nothing other than as soon as I leave this meeting, I'm going to go get my mess dress. so I do bada boom, bada bing, and that all becomes to reality. But like what Tim would say, without, naming people, I mean, the transfusion of going from an independent guard unit to TFI and then slow rolling this, it didn't feel like it was live stream at a fast pace. But, the active duty ops group chief took me under his wing. The active duty command chief put me under his other wing. I didn't ask him to. They just did. They knew that I needed some allies, and I didn't need to prove myself to them, but they took me under their wing, and a bunch of other people, and our command chief, which was a hybrid. They were still full-time in St. Louis, and they would come out on drill weekends and stuff like that. I was never deemed to be, the surrogate command chief. That was never asked of me. I just took it upon myself to represent the wing in our wing's best behalf, and I was on the phone a lot with, not a lot, but often with our guard command chief, going, hey, this is what's going on, just so you know, so when you get here, you're not caught flat-footed. Bada boom, bada bing. So it all moves forward at a pretty fast pace. So next thing you know, this B2 Gala is a formal event, and so my wife Irene, she gets all dialed up, and we go, and I got my mess dress on. It's hard to look bad in a tuxedo any way you slice it, right? So I'm going, and I see some of the, there's like 600 people at this event, because the airplane has been flying for 20 years at that point, unclassified. Whatever the classified version it flew, I don't know, but 20 years unclassified, and Chief of Staff of the Air Force is there, and we are sitting. This is 600 people. Going to a wedding with 600 people, a lot of people. Yeah. This isn't a wedding, but big ballroom full. We're sitting up close, from the, we're sitting, with the ops team, whatever, and the ops group chief and the command chief from the 509th, from the bomb wing, the active duty guys, like, hey, you and your wife need to come with me. I'm like, where are we going? I go, oh, you'll see in a minute. So Irene and I get up, and front and center with Chief of Staff of the Air Force. They're like, hey, cool. Chief of Staff of the Air Force, this is Chief Schneider. He's 131st. He's the first guy that's got operational control from a TFI component. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you saying all this to him? I don't need to be showcased. But they felt that it needed to be conveyed.
Sure.
And the general looks at me, and he reaches out, and he shakes my hand, and he goes, thanks for what you're doing. And he goes, and just continue, whatever you're doing, just continue to do it. And a few other kind words. I mean, the conversation wasn't much more depth than that, other than he seemed to be very sincere and genuine, knowing that the TFI was new and it was hard. Because he's hearing it from 100 different angles, that intuitively the TFI just wasn't going well. It was like a lot of arranged marriages. And like Tim said, again, it's like we didn't feel that in the time and the moment that it was going fast, but we were cooking along. And then those guys showed up, and then, you kind of heard, Tim, things really moved forward at a pretty quick pace.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But yeah, you alluded to the timing of the merger between life support and survival equipment.
Started in 08.
Right when all this was started.
Yeah.
So that made a difficult task much more difficult as well. So
yeah, that's for sure. Right. And the unique component of all of it, when you leave, the independent, the guard unit, we're kind of foot stomping it, but it's important because there's a whole bunch of obviously TFI is very live and well, I'll say well, across the spectrum, right? And things are just different. And it's not that it's bad, it's just, it's different. And things have changed immensely from an evolutional and a cultural perspective. And, when we're talking about the B2, I mean, it's, I can say back, I can not say back, I could say and reflect now, going back, that the 3 years that I was at Whiteman from 2008 and 11, some of the hardest days of my career, and just from a personal and a professional, just the strife of moving the family and 3 years of hard and all those things, it made me grow. And the opportunities in the moment were hard, but it made me grow. And being a part of that mission set, maybe not everybody agrees, but I can say personally, I can look in the rearview mirror going, that was good. It made me grow. And being a part of a strategic bomber because I'm sure Tim can echo it. It's taken serious out there 24/7.
Right. And we regularly did things that were way bigger from a strategic perspective, were way bigger than anything we ever did in the Eagle. I mean, we were really good at what we did in the Eagle, but we did stuff out at Whiteman that we still can't talk about.
Right.
It never made the news, and you'll may never know about it. But then we did some strikes that were very well publicized, or we allowed the media to hear about them. Or if we would go buzz North Korea, we would do it because we wanted them to see us. If we didn't want them to see us, they wouldn't.
Right.
Because anyway, I don't want to get into too many details on
it's the stealth
the
portion of that
B2
aircraft.
portion.
Funny story. Just talk a couple of mission profiles. So when before they got there and after they got there, obviously from a national defense perspective, there was a big crusade to get bin Laden because the SEALs hadn't got him yet. And so there were, a lot of sightings and intel saying, hey, he might be here. We know now via the news who got bin Laden. It wasn't the B-2, it was the Navy SEALs, and God love what they do.
Yep.
And, but I remember on a different, maybe a lighter note, I was, from the B-2 perspective, Tim and the guys are out there, and I get called by the leadership. Hey, you need to come to a meeting like right now. So I go to this meeting. I'm looking at this meeting. I'm like, something weird's going on. And the message was conveyed inside the meeting. I copy got it. And we had some trusted agents. Tim was one of my trusted agents. I said, I don't know what you got going on Saturday. I go, but I'm going to tell you what you got going on Saturday. I said, you need to come you and I are going to be at work at 10 o'clock at night. I go, so get a couple of the guys, from the team perspective, there's 50 of us out there. I go, get a couple of them. I go, we're going to launch something. I don't know where it's going. I don't know what it's going to do, but we're doing something.
Right. And in this day and age of social media, that was a real problem that we had out at Whiteman. If we told too many people, or if we had to act a certain way if we were actually going to do these real missions and stuff like that, because you tell one too many people and there's going to be a Facebook post or an Instagram post or whatever. I don't even think TikTok existed yet at that point, right. But yeah, so they always kept everything extremely close hold on these kind of things,
and rightfully so.
Be.
Right. I mean, you hear about it or you see it from afar, from the movies and Hollywood and all. I'm like, oh no, I kind of live that. I know what you're talking about, and it's not to embellish, amplify, what the experience was, but it was part of the growing process. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what we're doing, but I told Tim, I go, we're launching something. I said, I don't know where they're going. So we're issuing weapons. The jet's being configured for what it needs to do, and so I don't say, the only thing I've said anything to is Tim, other than the meeting or a couple meetings that I went to. So I'm at home, and I think it was on a Saturday night, might have been a Friday, whatever day of the week it was, doesn't matter. And my sister was up visiting us with her kids, and long story short, I need to be at work like at 11 o'clock at night. So, it's 11 o'clock at night. Everybody's getting ready to go to bed. So I go in, get cleaned up and got my uniform on. And wife goes, what are you doing? I'm going to work. Because I didn't say anything to her. Mm-hmm. She's like, what do you mean you're going to work? I just looked at her. She goes, I probably need to quit asking questions. I went,
she's just going to get the same answer.
I go, right. I said, I'm going to work. I said, I'll see you when I see you. So go to work, rendezvous with Tim. They pretty much did what needed to be done. And pretty humbling to see the B-2 crews walking up, and then next thing you know, they're being transported from the ops building out to the flight line to where the jets are in the hangar, because every B-2 had a dedicated hangar. And you see the hangar doors up, a few airplanes, lights are on. A couple hours later, they're taxiing out, and off they go. We didn't know where they were going. Mm-hmm. But I go, something's real.
Pretty exciting, though,
It's
really.
exciting.
It wells that up inside of you of what you're doing and why.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't always know the why, except for getting that plane out of there.
Right. You watch them take off at dark 30. It was middle of the night when they took off, and we weren't cleared to leave until they hit the first air refueling tanker, wherever that was. So somebody eventually said, "All right, you're cleared hot. You can go home." Well, okay. So I get home at daybreak, or seemed like daybreak, and go to bed. Obviously, because I've been up all night, and get up about noon, whatever time I get up. I'm kind of looking at my watch, going subconsciously, they took off about here.
Turn the news on.
I got the news on, and I am not talking about it, and it came live on the news. They're like, "Oh, by the way, some B-2s from Whiteman just launched an air campaign for Odyssey Dawn, and we took out all the command and control in Libya." Or not we, but the airplanes took out all the command and control in Libya. And that's when we go, "Oh, that's what they're doing."
Yep.
Right. So it was pretty humbling, because you were actually coveted into. There was probably there weren't many people in the wing that even knew that any of that was going on. But I'm sure Tim's got some accolades on top of that.
Yeah, it's just it just brought into a unique perspective of that. With the B-2 mission, we didn't have to deploy to do. We did deploy to practice, but working at our forward operating locations. But the vast majority of our missions like this, we did from home, and so it was interesting that you could go to work on any given day and have something like this come up. It wasn't an everyday occurrence by any stretch.
Very seldom.
Yeah, but yeah, we had back in 17 was the last. Before, prior to my retirement, was the last big strike that we could talk about, and that the one you were talking about, that was Odyssey Dawn. This other one was called Odyssey Lightning, and so this is when things were getting hot in Libya with them capturing Christians and torturing them, and just general chaos in Libya, and there were also some scattered terrorist training cells in that region that were going up into Europe and causing mayhem. Like, you may remember in southern France back in the mid-teens, there was a terrorist that drove a truck through a big crowded area in southern France. So fast forward to early 2017, some of our special forces see a truck in an unusual spot in the desert in Libya, and they're watching it with a drone. So they just follow the truck. They don't know where the truck's going. They're just like, we'll see where he goes. He might lead us somewhere. Well, he led them somewhere. So this truck leads them into this terrorist training camp. So they start surveilling this training camp and figure out what they're doing. And they figure out that they're about to graduate from this terrorist training camp and go into Europe and wreak havoc. So the president, Obama at the time, was given 3 courses of action, B-2 and a couple other ones which I can't disclose. He ultimately decided that the B-2 was the right tool for this job. Now, it wasn't just the B-2, it was the B-2 and a bunch of joint assets helping to coordinate all this stuff. But being a part of helping to execute that mission was, definitely the culmination of my career at Whiteman, getting to do that. And I was up for literally 24 hours that day. Not just me, but some of my coworkers and stuff like that helping us out. But that entire 24 hours, I never got tired at all, because we understood, I knew just enough about what we were doing that I never got tired that day, until I had about a 2-mile drive from Whiteman to my apartment in Knob-Noster. And in that 2 miles, like, my brain just disconnected, and I almost went off the road a couple of times. But
you don't even remember driving home, really.
Right, yeah. Not at all. But ultimately, so the airplanes took off at dark 30, like they always do if they're going to go east and do a mission, and went back into work the next morning, and down into the skiff, and we got to watch everything live on top secret.
Oh, live. There you go.
Yeah, we got to watch it live from drone footage and all that as the B-2s went in and took out this terrorist training camp and took out somewhere between 70 and 80 terrorists.
Nice.
And that was awesome.
Killing bad guys.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Killing the bad guys.
Right. I slept like a baby that night.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So.
But, you know, Whiteman again was a made you grow and experience, and riddled with a lot of challenges. You know, mine was for 3 years. Tim, like you alluded to a little while ago, was for 9. You know, but as the dominoes start falling, you know, in a positive way, you know, in 11, you know, obviously the NGB, you know, the chief billet became, you know, a viable option. You know, but I had to apply, I had to interview, and I had to be, you know, be the person that made it through the gauntlet, because I think there was 8 or 10 people. It seemed like there was that many. I don't know authentically how many people applied for the position. But I made it through the gauntlet, and the position was offered to me. And, you know, I just moved the family 2 years prior to that, because the family, you know, 3 years prior to that, I'm sorry. And so once I did the interview component, and, you know, the 06 called me from NGB, goes, hey, congrats, you know, the position's yours if you want it. And he goes, I'm sure you need to talk to your wife and whomever. He goes, just call me back a day or two when you made a decision. I said, you got it. So I go home, talk to the wife, talk to Irene privately, and we sit down with the kids. And at that point, I've been there 3 years, so my son Michael's 3rd grade, and my daughter Nicole's in 6th grade. And we just moved him 3 years prior to that. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, hey, an opportunity presented itself. I said, we don't have to do this. I go, and ultimately, it's going to be a family decision, because I don't have to do this. And so I shared, you know, Irene and I shared what the opportunity was. And for 3rd and 6th grade, you know, at that age group, they looked at each other, and Irene and I said, we don't want an answer now. We want you to talk as brother and sister privately and come back whenever you're ready. It can be tomorrow, the next day. Think about it. I'm like, okay. And then we had visited DC as a family and all that kind of stuff, so they understood because of the visit. You know, they go talk for a little while, and that seemed like that conversation was late morning, I don't know. That evening they come back, they're like, okay, can we sit down and talk? I'm like, sure. And they go, so when are we moving? I'm like,
they embraced it.
Yeah. And that, you know, that notification, you know, I interviewed, I don't know, January, February, and that, you know, took them a while to rally back. So long story short, I said, we won't do anything until school's out. And so we ended up moving mid-late summer of, I guess, 2011, I guess. And so professionally, you know, that upticks everything, and, you know, starts tipping some dominoes, because, all right, so I'm going to NGB, and I don't know what that means after 4 years. I go, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it. But for Halfman and Tim and the balance of the crew, but these two guys implicitly, because, you know, we keep on talking about between me and Tim and Paul. I mean, we were like the three amigos. I mean, we've been working with each other for a long time, and it was never ever anything about me or Tim or Paul independently. We kind of looked at things from a cohesion perspective, and so off I went. You know, that provided Halfman an opportunity, at least out of the gate, to get promoted to pin on chief. Then he drifted, from that billet, into the ops group chief billet, and then the command chief billet. While I was in NGB, at the time I was there for a year or two, then he was recruited to become the command chief. And so when he went up to the wing, the ops group billet is there, and then Tim was able to cascade into that. None of that would have happened in those sequencing of events if the NGB thing didn't happen. Yeah,
meaning National Guard Bureau, the man for our career field in the Air Guard. So
yeah, and that didn't, and I'm I'm hoping to be humble about it. That didn't happen by accident. There was a lot of preparation, a lot of things that happened over the long haul. Back from day one all the way to ramp up for that. And but as I was flattered that I was selected, and I was equally flattered that Irene and the kids were going to embrace it, because they had already made some sacrifices, and they knew what they were, because they'd just done it 3 years ago, and they were going to make another round. They were going to take the second barrel of that of the sacrifice, and we got out there, and a long story short, I know I've shared the opportunity from a personal perspective. Jerry Stoddard, who had held the position a couple guys before me, he was still up there working, and I was, kind of went up there for but for a house hunting thing, because I didn't know where we were going to bed down. He goes, hey, man, private schools and whatever. He goes, man, maybe you can get some housing on the Naval Academy. All right. That's in Annapolis. He goes, yeah. I go, I'm an Air Force guy. I ain't going to let an Air Force guy live on Naval Academy. He goes, don't know unless you call. So I immediately Googled, picked up the phone. They're like, well, we got a unit available. I go, I'll see you tomorrow. And Irene and the kids were with me.
And the drive wasn't terrible.
No, it wasn't bad
compared to any others around the Beltway.
Yeah, getting in, into Andrews or going to Pentagon, wherever you're going. I mean, the commute wasn't much different than what I was already doing.
Right.
And if Irene and the kids were here right now, they're like, yeah, we do it over again right now, because living on the academy, I mean, we lived like on the university, and it was like we lived, not that we personally lived in the 1950s. That's what Irene would say. It's like we lived in a gated community with security. The kids could go roam and go do what they wanted. Yeah. But the opportunities that presented themselves was just refreshing. I mean, obviously Nicole was a little older, but she got invited on a small handful of times. She got to go meet with, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense. They came to do motivational speakers for the midshipmen, for the students, and they always had a bank of tickets for people who lived, maybe not inclusively that lived on the academy, but our connections of living on the academy always gave us an opportunity. There were a couple other times where I'd be at work, and the president would fly in on Marine One and pretty much land in our backyard, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But Marine One would land, the motorcade would be waiting to take the president to wherever he is going for a meeting or whatever they're doing. Or the Navy SEALs would come in to do a demonstration for the midshipmen, because some of the midshipmen wanted to become SEALs. And they come in on an Osprey or on a helicopter, or they'd fast boat in. And, Michael at this point, he's 4th, 5th, 6th grade, very impressionable, and he's seeing all this happening kind of like in his backyard.
Right.
But and those were the positives. Those opportunities wouldn't have presented themselves.
Mm-hmm.
That's from a personal perspective of the growth path, going up to NGB and to oversee to be the spokesperson for the career field. Because I knew what it looked like, and I knew that I could hopefully give back and help. And as I was doing that, all of the not all, but the opportunities that were going to be afforded, especially back to Paul and to Tim, rightfully so, and the balance of the team. But I'll kind of get off my soapbox, because Tim was living things. He's shared a little bit, but I can embellish a little bit more on the guardrail thing here in a second. But you experienced it once I was gone.
Yeah, I mean, aside from what I've already alluded to, with the deployments and the interesting missions that we flew locally, I don't know, that 9 years was really a grind for me doing the commute. There were, I don't know, Karen would admit this, and we're not, I think both of us are curious sometimes how our marriage survived that. It was that bad.
That is so understandable.
Right.
I mean, you said 9 years, was it?
Yeah, almost 9 years. It was closer to 9 than it was 8. Yes.
Yeah, 3 weekends a month max.
Right.
Wow.
Right. We get vacation time and stuff like that, but but then there was other times where I used my vacation, to double dip on a trip, because we might go use the money or something for, because that, and then our kids went into college around that time frame as well. Our oldest son graduated high school in 2009, right like a month after I moved over to Whiteman, because I moved over in April of '09, because you were there for about 8 or 9 months before I got there. Right. And then our youngest son had just started high school at that point. He graduated in 15. So we were in the middle of trying to help them, get through college and stuff like that. Both of them were good enough students that they got some really good scholarships, but, trying to pay for our home in St. Louis and then paying rent out at Whiteman and then paying for school and all that. So there were some financial considerations. I had way too much time in as a technician to just give it up and
you were in
stop,
a tough spot,
but not enough to retire.
Mm-hmm. Still got a family to take care of.
Exactly.
All works.
Exactly. So
did you for a while share an apartment with anybody, or
I
did you guys buy a house? Together, or any of that stuff?
So when I first moved out there, probably about a month before I got out there, I had put some feelers out, seeing if anybody had an open room, because I didn't know how long I was going to be out there. I mean, I was going to give it the old college try. I was going to give it a shot. And I'd gotten a hold of one of our maintenance chiefs, and he had an extra room. It was kind of like in the attic of his 2-story house almost. So there were four of us all living there that were all doing the same thing. We were all commuting from St. Louis to Whiteman every week. So we were in that house for, I think 3 years before Dan Peters retired. He was the guy he owned the house, so he basically rented rooms to the rest of us. But it was very affordable what we needed at the time, because we were all, like I said, in the same boat. And then after that, 2 of us that had lived in that house moved out, and he bought a house, and then I rented a room with him for several years until I finally got an apartment of my own for like the last couple years I was out there.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yep.
Felt like an adult again, living by yourself.
I did, yeah. It was very refreshing. Yeah, it was very refreshing.
Roommate situations. See, that just adds to the toughness of what you
it does.
deal with.
It does, yeah. And we shared the cooking, which is all cool and stuff like that. But and for the most part, we all got along well. But every once in a while, there was some friction between the roommates. It's a bunch of grown ass men. It's like we're all like in our 40s and 50s, and so
how
it's
could
like
there not be some issues?
It's like grumpiest old men. Yeah.
It just echoes the sacrifices that you make. I mean, you can take a different trajectory, and like I'll do the college try, I'll give it a whirl, and then 9 years later. But there's just a lot of sacrifices, and it's what I'm getting ready to say. I'm not bitter by it. It's just this is the hand that we were dealt, but we made independent decisions of whether we were going to do something like that or pursue something, because we could have went to another unit, we could have found another. Just could have went off the grid and got a different job. It's not what we did, and we all looked at things from the perspective of let's just make this work. The leadership expected that if you were coming to Whiteman, you were going to toe the line.
Yep.
Right. Not everybody did, but you were expected to toe the line, and we just made, even though it was hard, made the best that we could, but a lot of sacrifices, personally and professionally. Just you can't get away from it. Mm-hmm. And and for me, uprooting, 2 times, not to embellish the whole thing again, but, my kids really grew from it, very impressionable years. And, our marriage, I mean, Irene and I, it's we're very cohesive and close, any way you slice it. But, she's always had my back. I would like to think I've always had her back, but I'm the one going to work, and I'm consumed in this, and she's trying to keep everything in check. Mm-hmm. And that's what spouses do, regardless of the spectrum. That's what spouses do to keep things together. And get up there and start navigating through the paces at NGB, and then Lauren was with me for the first year, and she decided that she was going to depart early, which was great. And then Bob Ozier from Montana shows up, and I'll
put a link to his podcast up here.
Yeah, and Bob and I were kind of like a yin and a yang. I mean, he, very smart, very articulate. He was on a crusade. I really didn't have to give any direction. He knew what needed to be done. Yeah, because he was feeling it. Obviously he came from the F-16 unit, coincidentally out of Montana. I came from the B-2s and the F-15 side, if you will, and we were going to do everything we could to hopefully make things better from a career field perspective. And you got to be reasonable what you think you can accomplish and, you know, what hurdles you can jump over. But I was pretty networked and dialed in, you know, with some of the MAGCOMs before I got up there. I knew I didn't need to convince ACC, AFSOC, and a couple of other ones because I was already interfacing with them, you know, being a team chief for whatever needed to be dealt with. I knew that I had to convince AMC and some of the other MAGCOMs, and they were very warm, every one of them, regardless of who the chief and their staff was. They were very warm, they were receptive. I go, look, the guard units are gained underneath your command, and I go, and I want to help you make your job a little easier. I said, but I need your help. And they all embraced it, you know. Not that it was perfect, but try to get the language in the AFIs to be softened up enough that it, not every time, but that it would be approachable or amenable for the guard units. You know, they were patient to understand. And, you know, 4 years went by really quick, really quick. And I was hoping, you know, at the end of my 4-year tour, I was hoping to get extended by 2 years. It didn't have to be in the AFE chief build. It could have been wherever. And, you know, I had a personal agenda. I was pretty transparent about it. I go, you know, my kids made a big sacrifice. And I go, at the end of my 4 years, my daughter was at the end, in between her sophomore and junior year, because my tour was going to end in July. And, you know, she wanted to finish high school where she started.
Yeah, I can't blame her for that.
Right.
You know, and as a parent, regardless if you got a military uniform on, you want to give your kid a shot. And it didn't happen. Right. It didn't happen. Doesn't matter why it didn't happen. It didn't happen. And so that was going to trigger a move. And so once we knew the move was happening, you know, my son Michael was going to be going into 7th grade, so he'd be going to middle school. She was, you know, wanted to finish out her high school there in Annapolis, where she was going to school. She was going to a Catholic high school there. And it didn't happen. It's water under the bridge. And so Irene and I went out for dinner. Once we knew, you know, I played every card that I could, and it just couldn't happen. So I said, well, what do you want to do? She's like, I'm ready to go home.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know what that means anymore. I knew what it meant. You know. She's like, she was ready. She goes, I'm ready to go back to St. Louis. Her, God love her parents. You know, my in-laws, her mom and dad were in their late 80s when we moved back. That was 2015. Mom and dad were still with us in our late 80s. And at that point, we had been gone for 8 years, 7-8 years between the Whiteman tour and the NGB tour. And so my kids really didn't know the grandparents. You know, my mom and dad were already passed, but on Irene's side. And she's like, I'm ready to go home. She goes, I want the kids to at least know, you know, their grandma and grandpa, et cetera. I went, okay, we'll do it. And so then I'm looking down a barrel of, all right, so what's in play for me? You know, this whole rehire rights and stuff like that leaves a technician going back to your state, which would be the state of Missouri. So, you know, a little bird was sitting on my shoulder that the state command chief built was open, was going to be open. It was really encouraged that I apply for that. So I put my package in, I submitted, I interviewed. It didn't fall the way that, you know, I was hoping it was going to fall. That's fine. And so the wing commander, or the vice, and the wing commander back at Whiteman, they're like, hey, I know you don't want to hear this, but at the end of the day, the C-130 unit in the state, they need some help. And I've talked with the wing and the vice wing commander up there, and they need your help. I'm like, it's on the other side of the state. Mm-hmm. They're like, they were as humble as they could be about it, but they're like, well, it is what it is.
Yep, at St. Joe.
Yep, at St. Joe. And so, you know, so I interview on the phone with the vice wing commander. He was very humble, was really hoping that I'd come to help, you know, fix from his set of lenses that what was broke. I went, okay. So I said, well, I need to come visit. So I did. You know, they kind of rolled out the red carpet, you know, between the command chief, met with the vice and the wing, and they were humble, they were appreciative. And I I said, well, I want you to know something with transparency. If I come, my wife and kids aren't coming. I go, that probably doesn't mean a hill of beans, other than they're going back to St. Louis. My wife's parents are in their 80s. They're like, got it. That makes sense. And I said, so I will come and I will give everything I got to fix what's broke. And I said, and when that's done, I go, I need to drift off into the sunset. Mm-hmm. And they're like, that sounds reasonable. I said, okay. So went there and did it. And like Tim, now I'm living away from the family, and I got an apartment, in St. Joe, and we bought a house back in, back in St. Louis. And, I had to buy a little bit smaller, than what we anticipated, what we wanted. It's all fine, and, it works. Mm-hmm. And, but those 20 months I was there, I wasn't with the wife and the kids every day, and a lot of things I missed, After hearing 9 years, I'm like, huh. Well, I knew 9 years. I mean, the stuff that Tim missed, but the sacrifices that you make. Mm-hmm. And, again, not looking for empathy. Those were decisions that we made. And if I had to do it all over again, would I do it? I guess I would, knowing what I know now.
Right.
And I think I did the best I could to fix what was broke. I was very appreciative that the leadership at St. Joe, they honored their word. And I honor mine. I mean, I'll fix what's broke. I said, but when it's time to go, it's time to go. And the group commander, he didn't know me with depth, but he understood. He says, you need to go home. But he said it very humbly, not like, you need to go home.
Right.
You need to be with your wife and kids.
With compassion.
Right. And, and fortunately, that technician matrix, I met the thresholds, and I could retire early. Even though I served for 33 years and a little bit of change, I was able to retire, go back home. So retired in May of 2017, so it'll be 7 years here next month. Mm-hmm. And it just seems like a nanosecond. And so, kind of went full circle, time you get to the end of everything. There's a lot of things that, man, I can sit back. I think Tim can do the same thing. You can sit back and reflect and going, wow, 33 years went by fast. And, virtually, the whole career, I really felt commanders got my back. The commanders got our back. And they empowered us. They gave us the resources. I don't ever remember anybody telling us no. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. And doing the deployments and being surrounded by, the cadre of people that we were surrounded by, it left its mark, in a good way. And hopefully I was able, I'm sure, Tim will have his accolades here in a sec, when I squelch it, but that I was as humble as I could be to get things in a trajectory that was in the best interest for the career field, best interest for the unit level, best interest for the pilot or the crew member, because as we've shared the narrative of what things look like, from mishaps, and not everything revolves around the mishap. But integrate new technology, whether it was Combat Edge or MVGs or joint helmet mounted cueing systems or new radios or whatever they were, and we took it to the next level. We felt we were taking it to the next level, but the commanders always had our back, and they didn't keep those opportunities away.
Right. I was going to say, I think we had a great string of commanders all those years, but having those great string of commanders and having the credibility that we had made it easy for them to jump on board and keep us well funded and cover our backs. So, between Mossmore, where you never got to work for Farmer. Not your Farmer from your early story. I'm talking
not Airman Farmer.
I'm talking B2 Farmer.
Yeah. I worked with him a little bit right before.
Right.
He was, I think, when I left for NGB, he was technically he was the bomb squadron commander when I left.
That's right. Yeah.
And then Willie B was the group commander.
Right.
So I worked for him a little bit.
That's right. You did. That's right. So, But great guys, and and then the trajectory, and again, not just exclusively from a personal perspective, but for the team, for the traditional guardsmen, and being, giving them opportunities and affording, whoever they're, whether a technician or a traditional, doesn't matter, giving opportunities to allow them to grow and to spread their wings, and
because that's a part of life's journey. You don't know what you don't know. And the only way you can really learn is doing some things, and you might fail a little bit while you're learning. And that's when you grow.
Right. So you did 9 years Whiteman.
Right.
Traveling.
Right.
And then you retired. What was after that?
Yeah, so I retired December 31st of 2017. I was basically unemployed for about 4 months, but I was kind of recharging my batteries and kind of learning how to live with my wife again. I mean, I don't mean that in any disrespect, because it was just as the same for her to learn how to live together 24/7 again.
Yeah, you can't just bust in the door and I'm home.
Right.
I'm the man of the house.
Right. Yeah, because over that course of that time, we all developed our own weekday habits and stuff like that, and so there was some growing pains coming back for sure. And then I had applied for another job, didn't get that. I mean, I wanted to work at there was a home for mentally handicapped adults in southwestern St. Charles County. I really wanted to do something like that, kind of my way back to, giving back to the community. I felt that I was at that stage in my life where I wanted to do that. Well, I applied for that job and didn't get it. And I was like, what the heck? So, so just in the interim,
Did you see my resume?
Right. Yeah. Did you see what I did last year? So in the meantime, I was like, I want to do something. So I'm going to go work at AutoZone. So I applied to AutoZone to be a commercial delivery driver. Had a blast doing it.
There you go.
It was relatively easy work. I mean, but I did that job the same way I would have done life support. Whatever the right way to do it was, or is there a better way to do it? In the meantime, I'd found out that there was some jobs potentially coming open at DCMA, the Defense Management Contract Agency, at Boeing in St. Louis. I'd never even heard of DCMA until a couple of years prior to that, probably just before Halfman got hired there. But anyway, there was a bunch of Gold Guard guys I didn't realize that were working at DCMA, and so there's some quality assurance positions come open, and I wasn't sure of my chances being a life support / AFE guy.
You're an ops
how well that and being an operations guy, how well that translates to doing quality assurance with a bunch of maintenance guys. But,
Loser.
Right? And so I applied once, didn't get the job, and didn't hear anything, and I didn't see any new job openings come up. And then about a month or two later, I'm driving my delivery vehicle, and fortunately it had Bluetooth, and I get this phone call from Human Resources out in Fort Riley. I see it's a Kansas phone number. I didn't normally do this, but I just answered it in the delivery vehicle, and she's like, "Oh, hi, this is Cece from Fort Riley, HR, and we'd like to, or DCMA is offering you a job."
Wow.
I'm like, I did an interview. She's like, well, she goes, "I don't care about that. I'm the delivery person telling you that we're offering you a position." So, so that really stunned me. And so that was, I've been with DCMA for about almost 6.5 years now. Well, it is over 6.5 years. Last week it was. So I do, I'm a quality assurance specialist on the FA-18 Super Hornet program.
Back in the fighter world.
Yeah, so when I'm in the plant, I am crawling all over F-18s, in and top, bottom, in and out all day, trying to find defects. And
that is sweet.
And I really, really enjoy the job. So I could retire anytime now, but I'm going to play it year by year probably, and maybe do a couple more years. I mean,
what a great way to go out.
Yeah, I love the job. Got a great team that I work with, great boss.
Paid your dues so
right,
hard.
Right. So, yeah, the last 6.5 years working there has been pretty sweet. So.
Nice.
Yep, and then let's say my oldest son, Glenn, he's a software developer, lead software developer for a company out of Columbus, Ohio, but he works at his office here in Wildwood, or his home office in his home in Wildwood. His wife, Chelsea, she's in supply chain logistics for a company that supplies bottles and cans in the beverage industry. My youngest son, Dean, is a analyst for the Federal Reserve Bank downtown. He analyzes data for indicators of fraud for federally funded programs like Medicare, Medicaid, stuff like that, Social Security. And then his wife, Olivia, is a doctor, and she's in her, she's about halfway through her OBGYN residency at St. Louis University Hospital. So
Everybody's doing well, sounds like.
Been a very blessed man, and so life's been
So
life's
happy
been good.
for you on all that.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So
Here you go.
Nice.
Yeah.
Got to have buttons once in a while.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course.
He's smiling big over there, hearing the end of your story here, and for as far as working deal, it's pretty sweet. Got a lot of support sitting over there to you, right?
Oh yeah.
And
Absolutely.
and likewise.
Right.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And you were talking about how well you and your wife are getting along, so you know where we're going from there.
Not exactly. I'm letting you lead the next question. I should probably I should probably embellish on that and kind of talk what I've done since I retired.
Yep.
So I retired 6 months, like I alluded to, before Tim, and it was just when you reflect, it was just it was a great ride, and it just went by fast. What I thought a 4-year hitch was going to be turned into 33, and just unbelievable opportunities, and how it shaped me personally, how it's impacted Irene and the kids, and at the end of the day, when I retired, I purposely, like Tim, I took 3 or 4 months off to decompress. I retired in May. So I'm going to take the summer off, kind of hang out with the kids, or as much as they want to hang out, which they wanted to hang out. Mm-hmm. And I said, when school starts up in the fall, then I will get going, right? Because even though I retired in the most expensive decade of my life for the commitments that Irene and I wanted to do for the kids, and our objective, like I think what Tim and Karen outlined, was if our kids, regardless of what our kids wanted to do, but coincidentally they both wanted to go to college, our pledge to them was to get them out of college debt-free, which we will do. Which my daughter graduated with her undergrad in aeronautics 2 years ago from St. Louis University, and during that time frame, right when she was a freshman, that she started dating this guy, Zach, who's now our son-in-law. So they've been with each other for 6 years. They got married, June of last year. So they've been married for 8 or 9 months, 10 months now. And she's finishing. She graduates with her MBA, with her graduate degree, on Mother's Day of this year. So extremely proud of her. Zach, her son-in-law, he's aerospace engineer, works for a company here in town, and they both did internships with NASA. It's kind of like gold on a resume. Mm-hmm. Did some, Nicole did some very interesting work, for NASA with her internship. She was part of a 15-person team to design the next generation Mars rover. They patented their idea. That doesn't mean that's what they're going to use, but just that opportunity to be, and they had to give an out brief to the director of NASA. Mm-hmm. And Zach worked, when he did his internship, he did some rocket propulsion analytics at Cape Canaveral. Worked in the same building that all the shuttle and the Apollo astronauts, when you see him coming out of the building, that's the building that he worked in. Mm-hmm. And so that's cool. Couldn't be more proud of both of them, just like Tim's proud of his kids and his daughter-in-laws, both of them. Our son Michael is a junior at St. Louis University right now, studying mechanical engineering. Smart, and just I just can't wait to see after he graduates next year of where his career goes. For both of them. But he's smart. He's very humble. He's very personable, and just a great young man. Irene's doing great. She's working for a logistics company. When I met her way back in the day, she was in college, and coincidentally, that's we didn't even talk about that. Shallow dive on that. Tim met Karen when she was in college. Karen had a friend, which is Irene. Long story short, we got introduced, and it's stuck for both of us.
I had forgotten about that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have remembered if you didn't say it again.
Right.
And
Right. And I met
Another
my
time.
wife because she was good friends with one of our weekenders in our shop who she went to grade school with. So
yeah, just
Small
weird
world.
how it all fuses together, right?
Right.
And so I met Irene. She was, I guess, a junior, studying computer science back in the day, and she, like, wicked smart. I go, this ain't gonna work. She's gonna see through this guy pretty quick. And she'll say, "See you later," and it stuck. And so she's, once the kids were born, she's like, she worked for a software middleware company, was very successful, and she's like, I'm gonna raise the kids. And did a great job raising those kids. And then once the kids got in high school, she's like, all right, I'm ready to get back into the saddle and start doing something. And so she's working for a logistics company. And I'll tie that bow here in just a second. But when I retired, I took that summer off, and so some of the audience, but this audience understands that Ted Poe, Chief Poe, I was friends with him personally, more from a professional realm. He was the ACC chief. When I got to Whiteman, the B2s were ACC game when I got there, and he was coming out to do a salve, and I knew him a little bit before them. And he came in and really, not that he took me under his wing, but he didn't. He's like, he knows what he's doing. He articulated that to the leadership. He took over PACAF, and he retired from PACAF 2 or 3 years before I retired, and started doing some consulting work. And so we maintained a little bit of a relationship after he retired, not real deep. He's like, what do you want to do after you retire? I go, well, I'm going to finish up my degree, because I was on a quest to get it done, and I did. And I got my degree in aeronautics, and I had a TS clearance after being at Guard Bureau, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go to work to NGA in St. Louis, National Geospatial. Some of our friends that we had in the Guard unit, not a lot, but we had a few people, and it was kind of a wink, wink, like, get your package in, we'll find you something. Mm-hmm. Not that it was a guarantee, but it was likely. Right. Education-wise, clearance-wise, I go, that feels right. And took my summer off, and Ted called me at the end of summer, kind of like clockwork. He goes, so what are you thinking? I go, well, school starts in a week or two. I go, I'll get with it here after that. He says, you want to do some consulting? I go, I don't know. What are you doing? He told me. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, well, I'll test drive that. So I started doing some consulting with him, still doing a little bit, but at the front end, started doing some consulting. And his analysis from that aspect, and I was grateful, is he wanted to give back, to the air crew, to the warfighter, and he got picked up by some of the industry that we're familiar with, with Gentex and Mark Baker Ejector Seat Company and a couple other ones, and it's kind of been fluid based, and it was a way to give back to the industry, because they really needed that residency from people that wore the uniform, that understands what goes on from an operational perspective as they're trying to innovate new technology or modify current technology. And a very unique, humble experience to meet with the leadership of these organizations, because they listen intently, et cetera, et cetera. So I've been doing some consulting. That was, I kind of had the throttles pushed up pretty good at the front end after I retired. Very grateful for Ted and just being supportive of all that and giving me that opportunity. And then, been retired for 7. So a couple years ago, the logistics company my wife was working for, it's small. It's lethal in what they do. It's small, and the owner, Frank, was wanting to put one foot into retirement, and he was starting to get on a pursuit to find somebody that could maybe manage the company as he put one foot in retirement. Irene says, well, you might want to talk to Jeff. Long story short, we went to a few lunches, worked it out, and he took me under his wing, and I kind of understood the business because Irene was already in it. And then just how my brain's wired and the things, how I process things, I hit the ground running and started figuring out the stride. So doing a lot of things with, project management, more from an estimating side to secure the business that we got. And the company's been on a pretty aggressive vertical growth path. So I've been doing that on steroids for the past couple of years and a little bit. So I'm doing that now. Get to work from home, work with Irene, pretty collaboratively, and it's just unique without getting into the nuts and the bolts of what we do.
Yeah, your office is over here, hers is around there.
Yeah.
I'm downstairs, and every once in a while I hear just a louder voice back and forth.
Yeah, we're talking
that. Yep. Then you're back on your own phones. But working together at home with your wife all the time and doing very well with it. That's what I was alluding to before. It's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool, and not and I acknowledge not everybody could do it.
Yeah.
And it surely isn't what I thought I'd be doing. I thought for sure, again, I'd probably be at NGA and doing those kind of things, but I'm good with it. And we get Michael out of college, a year from May, and we'll just continue to, Tim and I have in previous conversations, it's, life's a journey. And if you're fortunate in your quest of your journey, we kind of all, kind of define, it's kind of like you're on a surfboard, you're on top of the wave and you're riding it, and if you look at it from those optics, you go, man, it feels good when you're on top of that surfboard. When we were back at the F-15 unit at the pinnacle of everything, man, we just felt like King Kong. We got it licked, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually every wave crashes. When we got bracked and the jets left, we felt in disarray, and we had to get on another, on another wave and make the best of what it is, whether it's a Whiteman or whether it's whatever it is. So right now I'm riding on a wave and it feels good, and I don't know. Hopefully the wave doesn't crash for a long time,
or ever,
or ever, But with reality, life's going to happen, and if what you don't get to do is to see what's going to happen in front of you, but what you do get to do is look in the rearview mirror to see what's happened behind you.
Yeah.
And that's the comforting piece, and the accolade that you gave a minute ago. I mean, it's unique that I've known Tim pretty, with the exception for 8 or 9 months from a career perspective, but more importantly, we're friends.
Yes.
And just like you and I, the three of us were friends. If Halfman was here, I could riddle off a scroll like we all could.
Yeah.
That are authentically friends.
And there's a lot of commonality in that.
Right. But to work and to have that cohesiveness, with somebody like Tim, and even if Halfman was here and Schramm or whomever, it's just humbling, because there's just not people across the spectrum that get to experience it. And I don't know all the devils of the details of what's going on with Tim. He doesn't know with me, but you know what? We know enough.
Well, it's like those friends, Mark and I talked yesterday, you just got these friends where you could not see each other for 7 years, maybe have 2 phone calls in that 7 years. But then when you get back together, it's just like yesterday.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So someday, I don't know, you'll probably have some great grandkids, something like that. So they're sitting right under that camera there. What would you like to tell them?
Wow. That's a difficult question. It's not a difficult question. I mean, if they were able to watch this whole thing, they'd learn a lot about me. And
that was the point,
right?
First of all.
Right. Yeah. That they would, and I appreciate that. I actually thought about that when I was driving here. It's like, it's going to be a little time capsule here of sorts. No, just that, great-grandpa or great-great-grandpa did the best he could, joined in the military and did the best he could with raising a family and a career and being just a person in general, and just hopefully they can hear good stories and know that I would be proud of them no matter what, and hopefully they're proud of their old great-grandfather. So, yeah.
Excellent. Guess what, Jeff? Same question.
My turn. It's humbling to reflect, if you think about, what grandkids and great-grandkids, people that you haven't met yet, what they look like and what's in front of them. Not to echo exactly what Tim said, but, serving in the military, you don't meet a lot of people in today's era that have done it. I did it as humbly and as professionally as I could. And the real takeaway that, you know, that I've learned from all that, in conjunction with, you know, being raised in you know, my mom really instilled in me, is just always do the right thing when nobody's looking, and everything else will work out. And so I've instilled that into my kids, and for future grandkids and great grandkids, it's just go with your, you know, go with that sixth sense that we don't have, and follow your dreams. And you hear it all the time, follow your dreams, and don't let anybody say, no, that can't happen, because it can happen. You just have to pursue it. And as you pursue it, be humble, don't forget where you came from, and just reflect just simplistically from those set of lenses, and everything else in life will work out, because life is a journey. You don't know what's going to be thrown at you. Got a lot, you know, just like Tim, got a lot of faith in my life. I'm not over the top, but I got a lot of faith in my life. And as you have that, and you're on this journey, just follow your dreams, because not everybody has what we have.
Yeah.
So if you do that, you know, it all works out.
Right. You know, during I know Jeff was there, but during my retirement speech back in 2017, I mentioned a few. You know, I wanted to pass off what I thought were some tiny little bits of wisdom, that, not that I'm a smart man, but you learn things. I mean, you don't go to school. You go to school to get an education, but you got to live to get wisdom.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know, in that respect, you know, I encourage, you know, all my, you know, squadron mates and stuff like, you know, to maintain those, you know, those friendships, especially in the Guard, because, you know, we've got that whole family perspective, you know, but, you know, maintaining those friendships with, you know, because part of why you are the way you are is because of those friendships, or the people that you grew up with. I mean, they kind of help make you who you are and who I am today. So, you know, and you know, doing a job that you love, to me, has always been important. You know, and I would recommend, if you don't love a job, don't quit it tomorrow.
Right.
You know, don't quit tomorrow and hold out for a management position or something like that. So, all right, responsibly find, you know, a position that you know, even if you have to move around 3 or 4 times, or however many times it takes, you know, do what you love. Life's too short to do something that you don't love or you're passionate about. And you know, going in open general is not the way to find your passion, by the way. I don't know what lucky star I was born under, but it was. So, yeah.
Well, thanks a ton for getting this set up for the atmosphere. I really like it.
Yeah, very, very cool.
And
you know, a final throw out to Crash and Spidey, you know, helping with the conduit. But, you know, Crash, thanks for giving us the opportunity. This is a great backdrop, and love you, brother.
Jimbo, thanks for doing this.
You bet.
Yeah.
I'm proud to call you guys some of my best friends. Right. And it's just, like I said, I look forward to doing all these, but I will say that this one was extra special for me.
Yeah.
All right.
So
take care.
Back at you. Thanks.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks.
Finish it up. Get some supper.
So are we supposed to pretend like we're talking to each other, like at the end of the nightly news, as it's fading out?
Yeah.
How long was that? I wouldn't even.
I don't know the time we officially started. It's 6:56 right now.
Wow.
What time did we start?
Well, we started probably within 5 minutes of this being turned on, and this says 3 hours and 2 minutes.
Sounds about right. I was going to say, I think we started right before 4 o'clock.
Yeah. So great job, Jimbo, and just like Tim said, just devoting your passion, your energy, and buying the equipment and devoting your time. Like I said, this will be a time capsule. This will be things to be able to look back and reflect.
Yeah. All right. We'll start taking her down. And that's what I was saying ahead of time. If you need to move them around, do it.
Yeah, I had to move mine around a little bit. Right. Digging in on the backside.
There's a few times when you were talking, you wanted to do it, and you actually reached up and just kind of barely touched it and put your hand down. I'm like, do it, man. I know you're uncomfortable.